chivalric order of the Red Lions of the Roxas Empire. They are known for their dedication regardless of gender. Protecting the imperial family from invasion, they kept all nearby states at bay. The main culprit of such a cruel reputation is a girl named Kelia, commander of the Order of the Red Lions. Despite her background, she became the commander-in-chief at a young age. She was considered the best swordsman in history. She is a great hero who stopped the 7 Years' War. The girl looked at the pregnancy test and couldn't believe her eyes. "Child, this is impossible. Due to daily training, most of the female knights are infertile." She was sure that the same fate awaited her. But how? She was an orphan, abandoned in a deserted alley. She fought for life every day and grew up eating garbage. Thanks to her rapid development, she saved the Duke's only son at the age of 6. This is how her fencing training began in the ducal family. Balancing between life and death, she achieved the title of Commander-in-Chief of the Empire. A dirty, worthless orphan became a hero of the Empire, receiving respect and admiration. But what she wanted besides this was an unaffordable luxury for her. Kelia prayed, "Just let it not be a dream." She couldn't calm down. The news about her pregnancy overwhelmed her with joy, not allowing her to sit in one place. Having calmed down a little, she began to think about the child's father. It could only be one person, Simon. He is the chief archmage and duke of the Roxas Empire despite his young age. He was also a war hero who fought alongside her, the same son of the duke whom Kelia saved at the age of 6, her closest friend. No matter how it sounds, she got pregnant from her best friend because of one night spent together by mistake. This fact upset her a little. Thoughts of her baby filled her with joy again. She wanted to surround him with only the kindest words and the most valuable things. She was overwhelmed with love for the baby. Previously, she could only dream about it. It seemed to her that she only wanted to survive. The girl often dreamed of a family. About the family she never had. I wished that even with a small probability, someday a family would appear. She firmly decided to protect this miracle, no matter what happened. The only thing that confused her was whether or not to tell the child's father. She doubted that Simon's family would allow the birth of an illegitimate child. All family members except himself were extremely unpleasant individuals. It's better not to mess with them. The girl wondered if Simon would tell her to get rid of the child. She did not expect the same delight from him. He hates people, but the unborn child is not to blame for anything. She wanted to protect him from negative feelings like hatred. Kelia understood that she had enough strength and money to protect the child. There was no need to force the guy to marry her and play the role of a father. She didn't want a wedding. From childhood, they were like brothers. This was your best friend and drinking buddy, someone you could chat with all night. In addition, she remembered how, last time they met, he let slip about wedding plans. Looks like his heart was already taken. The girl decided that it was better not to tell Simon about this. Well, if someone demands to get rid of the child, even if it is Simon, then he will have to chop his ill-wishers into pieces. These thoughts frightened the girl. She realized that she could not do anything like that. At the same time, the situation will worsen if everything is left as it is. There was only one way out of this situation. You need to leave your post. Right. The 7 Years' War is over. And now that peace has come, it's time for the war hero to disappear. Kalia's squire named Haiming saw her descend in the uniform of the commander-in-chief of the Order of Knighthood. She looked like a goddess of battles and a beautiful monster, eclipsing the sky with her radiance. Kalia told her that she needed to go somewhere alone. The girl brought a very elegant white horse for the ride, but Kalia remembered her position and asked to prepare a carriage for her. She had never used a carriage to get around, so this request greatly surprised the girl's squire. Kalia's carriage arrived at the main palace of the Duke's family. The girl walked along the spacious corridors of the palace, thinking about how to explain her resignation. On the way, she accidentally stumbled upon a group of society ladies, among whom was Elena. Even at 40, she looked like a 20-year-old beauty and is considered the queen of high society. Everyone around knew that she had replaced Kalia's mother, Simon's mother. Although the girl grew up in the Duke's family, she lived in the back room, where not even a ray of light penetrated, and ate at the table with the servants. To meet little Simon, you always had to ask Madame for permission. That's how it all happened. But now the girl didn't care about all this. Although she achieved everything thanks to the support of this family, this woman's care was only in front of the crowd. After exchanging pleasantries, they brushed each other. No one could be more beautiful than Elena. All the ladies tried to please her and indulged her desires. If she smiled, the whole secular society smiled. If she cried, the others shed tears too. Somewhere in another part of the castle, Liman Rojas was sitting in his office, Crown Prince of the Roxas Empire. When Simon suddenly opened the window, all the documents scattered around the office, and Simon, with the help of his incredible magic, immediately restored order. They discussed the sudden arrival of Kalia to the palace and the reason for it. The Crown Prince noticed that 2 months ago something happened between them. From that time on, Simon was often overcome with great anxiety, or he completely lost touch with reality and avoided meeting the girl in every possible way. Unlike him, Kalia looked the same for 2 months. Simon again pretended that he had something to do and left the prince alone to wait for the girl to arrive. Although he was constantly daring and making fun of the crown prince, the prince understood that he was only able to get his current position thanks to his arrogant brothers Simon and Kalia. He was sure that for the prosperity of the empire he needed the power of Simon, the same with Kalia. And he knew that just as he had devoted his life to the empire, so Simon had devoted himself entirely to Kalia. A girl entered the office and greeted the crown prince. He was glad to see her and asked the reason. "I came to ask for resignation." The girl answered him in a confident voice. This was very unexpected for him. He didn't understand what this meant. Why? Why suddenly out of nowhere, he asked Kalia. But she answered that she needed to rest and needed time. She couldn't tell all the details. Although the prince assumed that it was Simon and their strange behavior all these 2 months, Kalia could not tell the whole truth. And despite all the prince's persuasion, she insisted on her own. She promised that if something happened in the empire and they needed help, she would return immediately. The prince had no choice but to give his tacit consent. The door closed behind her as the girl left the office. The hardest part was over. She breathed a sigh of relief. Now you need to think about your next steps. The days are getting shorter and the rainy season is about to begin. This period in the empire is short but destructive. Within about 2 or 3 weeks, the entire sky becomes covered with black clouds, and the rain begins to pour without stopping. To keep the damage to a minimum, the Ministry of Magic is providing support throughout the country. The rainy season is the most burdensome time for the ministry, so you need to leave before it starts. The girl decided firmly. If she doesn't make it in time, she won't be able to leave, and then it will be too late. There is still a lot to prepare. First, you need to meet Simon at least once, the girl thought while looking out the window. She remembered that very day. How did it all happen? She didn't mind. Was it the alcohol you drank? Or is it all due to that strange magic scroll? What's the point of looking for someone to blame now? On that day, a small party was held to celebrate victory in the 7-Year War. Everyone had fun and admired the invincible General Kalia. She is simply incredible. In the middle of the evening, Simon appeared and offered to escape from this boring event. They went out into the garden at night. The guy grumbled that she was drinking a lot of alcohol today. But the girl was in a good mood and she joked and imitated him. Unexpectedly, the guy took her hand and said that he had something for her and asked her to follow him. Kalia was surprised, but the guy looked at her misunderstanding and asked, "Isn't it your birthday today?" The girl laughed. It wasn't a real birthday, just him celebrating it. Made the day she joined the ducal family her birthday. It was very nice of him. A little later, they came to the top floor of the magic tower, where Simon's laboratory was located. He handed the girl a box, looking into which she saw the contents and asked with feigned disappointment, "Scrolls again?" She laughed. He gave them on every birthday. This was his consistency. The guy froze in amazement. "How can you be so stupid?" And he began to explain. There was a scroll that erases the traces of its owner. You cannot be tracked by magic or bloodhounds. The other was a scroll of instant teleportation, and the green one is a healing scroll. It's the most expensive. The guy seriously described the properties of each magic scroll. All of them were made by the Archmage himself. "But I know this one. He calls you." The girl pointed to one of the scrolls. Looking at the guy, she couldn't help but think, "I admit, he's damn handsome. Now I understand a little why all the ladies make such a fuss about him," the guy continued. "Just break it and call me. Even if you are on the other side of the continent, I can find you, Kalia," the guy said tenderly, looking into her eyes and stroking her hair. Suddenly, the girl laughed nervously and made an awkward joke, ruining the romantic moment. This prank made Simon very upset. For more than 5 years, he diligently dropped hints, but she never guessed. Stupid General Kalia, for whom nothing exists except the sword and war. Kalia thought that he was too rude, but it was better to leave him alone until he calmed down. Now it's better to leave. As she left, the girl noticed a magical scroll that was different from the others. Taking it in her hands, she read the inscription. If there are feelings, the body will become excited. And if the body becomes excited, then the feelings will stir. What is this? The curious girl asked. Simon immediately rushed to take the scroll away and nervously said that it was better to put it back. It was a very dangerous thing. But the girl was not embarrassed. She thought that he was playing her and started fooling around, trying to lure the guy into the game. But Simon stood sullenly and did not give in to her provocations. I was just joking. Why are you reacting this way? Seeing that there would be no fun, Kalia said. Simon asked with a serious face. Are you not at all interested in what this scroll is and why it is dangerous? And he continued. This magical scroll will show whether two people are in love with each other or not. What? The girl was surprised. If you break it off with someone who has even a little sympathy, irreparable things can happen. The guy answered, well, do you know how it happens? When you are with your loved one, you often feel a surge of feelings. For example, lust, or something like that when you want to kiss and merge into one. Kalia was speechless for a moment in surprise. Having come to her senses, she embarrassedly urged the guy to be more restrained. Simon laughed and said that he had only tried to clarify as politely as possible, and asked, did my words sound dirty to you? No? Then you blushed from your vulgar thoughts? The guy did not calm down seeing her violent reaction. Now he began his game, mimicking and provoking the girl. It's just a piece of paper if both don't have feelings. But this isn't about you, Kalia. It doesn't cost you anything to break it. He teased the girl more and more. Kalia understood. He provokes me on purpose. What an asshole. Since childhood he has always played with people in this way. She always fell for it. But now it has reached the point of absurdity. She won't do this. Maybe you like me. Is that why you're afraid that something might happen? Simon provoked further. This was the last straw. The girl grabbed the magic package and tore it apart. Something happened. Why do I get so sensitive around Simon? She thought. Damn, what have I done? What a fool I am. Are you satisfied now, Simon? Is it so much fun to mock me? Kalia was angry with the guy and with herself that she had again succumbed to his tricks, but at the same time she felt that something was happening to her. Why does he shine so much? She thought, not understanding what was happening and confused in her thoughts. Kalia, what's the matter? The guy got worried. He saw that the girl was a little out of her mind. He tried to grab her to help, but Kalia withdrew her hand with a sharp movement, showing with all her appearance that she did not need his help. At this moment, her head was spinning and Simon's words were spinning in her thoughts. When you are with your loved one, you often feel a surge of feelings. For example, lust, or something like that when you want to kiss and merge into one. Something went wrong. The girl realized that she urgently needed to leave here. She quickly left the laboratory despite the guy's attempts to find out what was happening to her. He tried to stop her, but Kalia was not amenable. She said that she urgently needed to go to her estate. Jumping onto her horse, the girl galloped away, leaving the guy alone with disturbing thoughts. But after a few moments, she realized that she couldn't just leave. Why? Why the hell? Shit! Damn Simon! The surprised guy saw her return. And before he could ask her what was the matter, Kalia grabbed him with words, quickly neutralized the effect of the scroll, and unexpectedly passionately kissed the guy. Damn Simon, it's all on your conscience. What happened next is not difficult to guess. What a piece of trash I am, Kalia thought as she returned from her memories, making a baby in just one night. Also from a friend who has been like a brother to her since childhood. Going out into the garden, the girl met the person she had just been thinking about. It was Simon. Long time no see, Kalia. It's been 2 weeks now, you've been avoiding me so skillfully, he said as they approached each other. Have I been avoiding you? You yourself. Kalia's boyfriend almost burst out in surprise at the words, but instead she asked for forgiveness for treating him badly, although she remembered that she had made more than one attempt to talk to him. The first time she came right after that night and wanted to apologize, and he got angry and kicked her out. The next time they met in the garden, the guy complained that the elders were rushing him to get married. The girl extended her hand to him for a conciliatory handshake and told him not to worry. She would take what happened that day to her grave. She congratulated him. He got angry and created seas of fire. No matter how much she thought, Kalia did not remember avoiding him. Listen, Simon, this is the first time this has happened to me. The girl again tried to start a conversation about it. I didn't think it was so hard for you that you couldn't get out of bed for several days. The boy's cute expression began to change. Who couldn't do what? He hissed. I couldn't get up, but I didn't want to. Such an obvious difference cannot be ignored. In any case, sorry. Kalia tried to calm him down. But there was no stopping him. He started to get angry again, just like all the previous times. Do you think I just got the title of Archmage? It's not so easy for some spell to defeat me. The guy was angry because he couldn't explain to Kalia that it was not just about the magic scroll. But because of this damned scroll, their friendship turned to passion. Now she could no longer contain her emotions. Eventually, Simon realized that nothing would come of this conversation. He warned that he would be leaving for 2 weeks to install protective magic circles, and he promised to explain everything to her in detail upon his return. So let's get back to this conversation later. Fine, he said, and asked not to leave anywhere until his return. The girl also calmed down a little and, remembering Simon's possible wedding, decided to ask, Simon, do you still hate children? He himself started talking about marriage, and of course after it he will need to think about it. The guy was surprised by this question, but thought a little and answered, I still hate them and I'm unlikely to love them in the future. This answer was not pleasant but quite expected. After saying goodbye, the guy left. As expected, Simon shouldn't tell about the baby, Kalia thought, left alone after he left. That evening, Simon reflected on the conversation he had had with Kalia the day before. In his thoughts, he admired her. She confidently steps on the ground and keeps her back straight. Her chin is always raised high and her gaze is directed forward. She is simple-minded and ambitious. In contrast to her lemon-soft hair, she has rough hands with traces of barely healed wounds. Scars that will last a lifetime are a source of pride for her. These are traces of her efforts and evidence of the path that made her who she is now. Stupid aristocrats pointed their fingers at her, mockingly calling her the Iron Maiden Kalia. But even then, she confidently walked forward. Suddenly, the guy remembered Kalia's question at the end of their conversation. Why did she suddenly ask a question about children? This woman definitely told her something. Simon suddenly realized. Luina. He remembered how, after that very evening, he did not find Kalia in the morning. She had already left, which was not surprising after what she had done that night. Having gone down to the lobby of the magic tower, the guy heard someone addressing him. You finally made it down. Finally we met. Did you sleep well? The surprised guy remembered this girl who smiled kindly at him. At the victory party, Luimond introduced her as the third princess of Ainz. She said that she saw Kalia coming down from the guy and thought that he should also come down soon. So she decided to wait for him. Can you guess why I was waiting for you? She asked the surprised guy, who had no idea why. The beautiful girl declared in a solemn voice, I am Luina. Princess Ainza has arrived to the magician Simon with a marriage proposal. Sir, will you marry me? She asked. Unthinkable on such a good morning, the shocked guy thought. But after collecting his thoughts, he answered in a polite tone. I am grateful for such words, but I cannot accept your offer. I refuse. She clearly did not expect such an answer. She was filled with rage and anger. Is this all because of General Kalia? She screamed and added that she saw her leave his room early in the morning. It's too early to meet simple friends. But she didn't care about that. The girl was not going to blame Simon for who he had dated in the past. The guy did not understand why he should hear such a word as reproach. Is there something connecting us with you? He asked in a cold tone. Luina stated that he saved her during the last battle, and in general this was also an excellent offer for him. Simon did not see the need to continue this conversation, and having said goodbye and not paying attention to the girl's fame, he went home. Aren't you even interested in why I proposed getting married? The girl asked, trying to somehow detain the guy. There was something that still interested him. Did Kalia see her when she left in the morning? Luina was furious. Is this the only thing you're interested in? Yes. What interests me most in this world is her. The guy answered without hesitation. For 7 years he could not confess his love because of the damned war. At least thanks to him and Kalia they managed to end the war. But so what? He was a man who was given an apology the next day. He was so enraged by Kalia's stupid apology note that he couldn't even find out if Kalia had seen the princess that morning. But to say sorry to the man you spent the night with? Like she did something she shouldn't have done. Simon admitted with regret that he had acted like a fool all this time. It had been at least 7 years since he realized that he was in love with this lout. A little bit later. The Crown Prince invited Simon to have a drink with him. Simon became worried. Did something bad happen, or did the conversation with Kalia not go as expected? The prince calmed him down and told him that he had received an offer of engagement in exchange for his help in the war. This noble family requested the position of the future empress. The prince himself assumed that they would target the empty seat of the crown prince's wife, but he still couldn't help but worry. What did you and Kalia talk about? Suddenly, a curious Simon asked the prince. Minor problems with controlling soldiers. The prince decided it was better to answer this way. He understood that no matter how sympathetic Simon was, his personality changed radically when it came to Kalia. It's better not to reveal the truth, he thought. Since there was nothing important, Simon was about to leave, when suddenly the prince said, "Speaking of your trip," he wanted to say, "Maybe you won't go." But he could not utter these words, but said others, wishing him a successful trip and a speedy return. Lord God, why are you sending me these tests? He didn't understand when Simon left. General, please think again. Kalia informed her subordinate about her resignation. The captain of the Imperial Guard named Brick said that he could not become her successor. He persuaded her to change her mind, or at least make him a worthy replacement. The girl is tired of this. He had been acting like this for 3 days now, and she didn't have time for this. He was afraid that if the knights found out about this, chaos would arise. Or even worse, a hostile state may launch an offensive. But the girl replied that because of her departure, the empire would not lose all its military power at once. There is nothing to worry about. But the warrior was as capricious as a child, and even wanted to hear about the general's departure. The fact that she didn't even talk about the reasons for her leaving angered him even more. In the end, she told him to temporarily take over all her duties and let him go, ordering him not to talk about it with others. Finally, he left. Kalia jumped out of her chair. She had no time to sit around. There was only 1 week left until Simon returned. It was necessary to move. How do these clothes even fit? Puzzled, Kalia stood over the woman's dress, not understanding what to do next. A squire girl entered the room and said that she had secretly driven the carriage into the backyard, as Kalia had ordered her. She couldn't believe her eyes when she saw her mistress in a dress. She couldn't find the words. Why does even the dress fit her like a glove? You also look cool in uniform, but the dress gives you elegance and nobility. The girl admired the transformation of her mistress. Kalia thanked her, but only one thought tormented her. How do people wear these uncomfortable things? The only plus was that it was cool in the skirt. Kalia warned that no one should know about what the girl saw here. Nobody. Even if His Majesty the Emperor arrives, she said seriously, and added to the joyful girl that she would take her with her on a business trip, as she would need her. Having set off, the carriage passed through a familiar place. Kalia saw through the window the slums she left 8 years ago. They looked very sad. She asked to stop for a while and got off the carriage. She never wanted to come back here. Still, it was strange. She remembered saving Simon as clearly as if it had happened yesterday. But all the memories up to that moment were vague, as if in a fog, no matter how hard she tried to recall them. How the hell did I survive in this dark alley? The girl thought, looking around. If we delay a little longer, we won't have time to arrive at the appointed place. Suddenly, Kalia came to her senses, and this could not be allowed. And returning to the carriage, they moved on. Sitting in a diner, the servant looked out for the man with whom her mistress was meeting, although she didn't even know what he looked like. A cute child, the son of a worker, was sitting at the table nearby and was drawing something. Looking at him, Kalia wondered what her baby would be like. She will be happy with both a boy and a girl. A worker came up to take the order and asked forgiveness for her son if he was disturbing them. The guest replied that he was very nice, did not bother them at all, and ordered 2 fruit smoothies and cakes. Seeing how hungry the boy was looking at them, Kalia offered him a piece. But he remembered that his mother asked not to disturb the guests and did not dare, although he really wanted to. Then they agreed that for the treat he would paint a picture and the cake would be payment for his work. So they did. He has real talent. Kalia laughed when she saw her portrait. Suddenly they heard a strange noise. Kalia saw that an inadequate man was pestering a diner worker and demanding a drink. In response to all the persuasion and explanations that alcohol is not sold here, he threatened and mocked us even more. He threatened to turn everything upside down here. A guy who suddenly appeared intervened with words. "What are you allowing yourself? Stop it!" And he boldly approached the group of hooligans. who, without further ado, knocked him down with several strong blows and continued to mock the poor woman in front of her frightened son. The next moment, they all saw how some rich woman in a hat fearlessly stepped into the center of the pack, and the next moment planted a fork in the hand of the main bully. For a moment, everyone froze in surprise. The enraged lout ordered his friends to kill the girl. I didn't know that public safety was at such a low level. As soon as Kalia had time to think, all the hooligans rushed at her. A minute later, they were all lying on the floor. They were too weak for those who behaved so defiantly, Kalia thought over the defeated. And looking at the main instigator with a sly look, she said quietly, "Either I'll finish you off here now or just run away from here," which he immediately decided to do. "I still won't let him get off so easily," the girl thought and threw a bottle at his head after him. The frightened boy rushed to his mother. "It's all over. The terrible thing is behind us." The woman thanked Kalia for her help. She was also worried about the condition of the guy who came to her aid and was lying unconscious. "Dr. Allen, he was supposed to be meeting with a patient here," the woman said. "Dr. Allen?" the upset Kalia asked again. "Come on, why are you so unlucky? This is the guy she was waiting for." Kalia remembered that she almost forgot about the drawing, which she exchanged for sweets. Approaching a boy named Clark, she began to talk about how to protect your loved ones. You need to be either strong or very strong. She didn't know how to become smarter, but she had tips on how to become stronger and not get hit by bullies. "Can I teach you?" Kalia asked, leaning towards the boy. She advised him to go to the nightly academy, where they would select a suitable curriculum for him. "You just need to name the name. Josiah Taraban." "Who is she?" the boy's mother said thoughtfully. She knew that not everyone could enter such an academy. The mother saw how her son's eyes lit up with the desire to enroll in it, and gladly agreed to such a generous offer. She hugged the girl with words of gratitude, not hiding tears of joy. Having said that the boy must attend the academy without absenteeism, otherwise he will be expelled, Kalia headed to the carriage. A few days later, "Are all preparations completed?" asked the young Dr. Allen, entering the room. Kalia had everything ready to leave. All that was left was to move her suitcase. Before the girl had time to take it, the doctor snatched the suitcase from her hands and shouted reproachfully, "You can't carry heavy things. In early pregnancy, you need to be especially careful." The doctor was just as they said he was. It doesn't look like it, but he is very grouchy. Kalia's family doctor was unable to follow her because of his family, but instead she promised that she would introduce the girl to her cousin. Although he grumbles a lot, he can be trusted. Ever since his wife died during childbirth 6 years ago, he has been studying pregnancy management and childbirth. I'm sure it will help you a lot. I remembered the words of family doctor Kalia. It was clear that he was very responsible. The doctor did not want to listen to anything and said that he would take everything himself. Since Kalia will soon be a mother, for the sake of the child, she always needs to try to be more careful. Mother! This idea that she would soon be a mother was still so unusual for Kalia. She even doubted her pregnancy and thought that maybe she was just sick. Alan laughed at her. Of course she was pregnant. A pregnant woman is as fragile as a newborn. At least he thought so. The carriage was already waiting for them at the exit. The squire girl was also planning to go with her mistress. She did not even allow the thought of staying in the capital and finding another mentor. Who knows? She never left it, and was glad for such a trip. They were going to a boring village where there might not even be a chance to draw a sword. But the girl didn't care. "Then I'm leaving, Jacob. Give him the letter when it arrives." Kalia gave the last orders to the servant and set off, casting a farewell glance back. At the same time, the concerned crown prince watched her departure. He was worried that when Simon found out everything, he would come after his soul. At least he managed to persuade Kalia to take a vacation instead of resigning. "Don't leave us for long, and come back safe and sound, Potassium," the prince thought, standing at the window and watching the moving carriage. The carriage was already moving far beyond the capital, when Kalia decided that starting from this place they needed to cover their tracks, and it was time to start using the magic of instantaneous movement. Using a magic scroll, a few seconds later they found themselves in a completely different place. The squire girl didn't even have time to understand what happened. "Is it already over?" she asked the lady in disbelief. And at that moment she saw that their carriage was passing along the sea. She was delighted. They actually moved instantly. Kalia watched the girl's euphoria and surprise, and this world could no longer surprise her. Although from all the places to travel, there was no better landscape than here. She also arrived here for the first time. The girls stood on the embankment and admired the sea. At this time, all the people around were discussing the news that at the auction, someone had bought a very rare and expensive pink pearl. These pearls symbolize eternal love and a happy family. It's time for us to humming. Time is running out. No matter how beautiful it was here, they still had a long way to go. The doctor was already starting to worry that everything was fine. Kalia used the scroll for the 5th time in a row. An ordinary person would have collapsed from overwork by now, but Kalia calmed him down. There was a time when she used the scroll 10 times in a row. Kalia's possibilities had no limits, and she tore apart another scroll of movement. While the carriage magically disappeared, people around continued to gossip. They said that the Archmage Simon himself bought these pink pearls and lovingly packaged them. A little bit later, "I'm going to be sick," a girl complained at the carriage who was already feeling ill due to frequent travel with the help of scrolls. Kalia remembered that there must be a city somewhere in the vicinity. The doctor, using a map, confirmed that he was not far from their location. The place is called Antique. There was nothing special about him. Quiet old town. If you hurry, you can get there by evening. The carriage took longer to travel. It was already late evening when they arrived in the town. From the carriage window, they saw a huge tree, which apparently was very many years old. Kalia was very surprised that at such a late time some children were still playing on the tree. She looked at their games. It looked dangerous. The carriage stopped abruptly and Haiming, losing her balance, hit her face hard. The impact caused her lip to crack slightly on the inside. "Hurts badly?" concerned Kalia asked the girl. But at that moment she did not feel pain. She even forgot how to breathe. It was hard for her when her mistress was so close, she could not even breathe. The girl was very embarrassed by the mistress's attention. The doctor said that they had reached the hotel where they would spend the night, and he carefully added that Kalia had spent too much energy on the journey, and she definitely needed a good rest. Unlike the entrance, Kalia's room was quite clean. The blanket was well fluffed and the smell of the sun filled the room. The girl was glad that here she could immediately fall asleep. "I cannot fall asleep." Kalia lay on the bed and her thoughts did not give her rest. Simon should be back tomorrow. He said that he had a conversation with her. She began to doubt her decision, but she knew for sure that she must definitely go to that place. "At least later, but you'll have to tell Simon everything." And yet why does he hate children so much? Kalia was sad in bed. She even thought that if she were to tell him honestly, "This is your child." But what if he answers that it is better to get rid of him? "Damn you, brat." Kalia was angry. What is she thinking about again? I needed to get ready. Simon hadn't said anything yet. Due to insomnia, all sorts of stupid things came into her head. The girl decided that she needed to breathe in the fresh night air. Approaching the open window, Kalia suddenly noticed that children were still playing in the tree. She left her room and went to a large tree with the children. They swung carefree on the branches. Suddenly, one of them said to the others, "Look, man, looks like she sees us." They were surprised, looking at Kalia standing below. "Half-elf? What a beautiful hair color." The children were talking among themselves. "Are you human? Are you fairies?" the surprised girl asked. "Wow, she even hears us." They rejoiced. They haven't met people who could see them for a long time. Kalia had heard about fairies several times from Simon, but he said that they are not so easy to meet. 20% of the world is occupied by the fairy empire. Almost no human has ever set foot on their lands. These creatures carefully concealed the entrance with the help of a barrier and a huge tree. Sometimes they live among people, hiding your appearance. Apparently this was just this case, Kalia thought, looking at the unusual creatures that looked like children. "I am human, and this is my first time meeting fairies," she answered. This answer puzzled one of them. If she is human, how can she see them? "Maybe it's all about the baby in your belly," one of them suggested. "How did they find out that I was pregnant?" Kalia was surprised. Seeing her surprise, the fairies said that they see children, and sometimes very small children can see them. The children came down from the tree and came closer to the girl. Coming closer, they began to talk about how this was an unusual child, or rather a special one. "What does it mean?" The surprised Kalia did not understand. They said there was a very beautiful shining light coming from her belly. It was the first time they had seen a child emitting light. This child will definitely be special. Kalia knew that the fairy's words were regarded as a prophecy. She just wanted the child not to repeat her fate and to live an ordinary life. She felt bad from these thoughts, and the children noticed how pale her face turned. They began to worry and suggested that she give the fairy dew. If she really needs it, they can share. Kalia thanked the baby for his concern but refused. She doesn't need to give fairy dew. This dew is very valuable and is known as a panacea. But it's made from your tears, isn't it? I'm much tougher than I look, the girl answered, hugging the cute baby. Everyone wanted hugs and rushed to Kalia. It was already time for her to leave. Kalia promised that she would visit them again tomorrow before leaving and left. After she left, the children began to discuss this unusual meeting. They noticed that this bright, beautiful light was not only coming from the child. This person also emitted a subtle light around him, but she called herself a human. They didn't understand. She herself may not know that she is not human. Suddenly, one of them suggested cheerfully, and as if nothing had happened, they began their games again. The next day, as promised, Kalia came to the tree where she had met the fairies the day before. But no matter how much she called them, no matter how much she peered into the tree, no one answered her. Maybe they're sleeping, the girl thought, walking around a large tree. Unexpectedly, under the tree she found a small shiny bottle. She thought that someone had just dropped it and needed to return it to the owner. Suddenly the tree rustled its leaves, frightening Kalia in surprise. She understood it told her that the vial had not been lost. The girl guessed that the children had been left especially for her before leaving. And again the tree responded, but this time approvingly. It was fairy dew. If they were here, I would at least thank them. She was sorry. After checking to see if anyone was nearby, Kalia left her morning cookies under the tree. She was in a hurry and had no more to thank them for. Tell the kids when they wake up, the girl asked, turning to the tree. Touching the trunk, she felt a slight approving vibration. The trunk seemed to tremble. It was time for her, and she headed to the carriage. Walking past the house, Kalia noticed a man on the balcony watching her. The man with a glass of wine watched as she got into the carriage. Who is this woman? He thought, and was surprised that she lovingly stroked the tree, as if it were special, and spoke tenderly to him. The door opened and a tortured fairy burst into the room. She exhaustedly extended her hands to him with pleas and help. We will help you, the guy whispered insidiously in her ear. He took her out to the balcony and told her to stand here and look at the tree. Do you see fairies? He asked the frightened fairy. But she didn't see anything. It turns out your treatment was a waste of energy, the guy said, squeezing her face tightly with his hand. Then he turned to another man named Timon, and he used magic to strike a large tree. It shook violently. Branches and leaves flew to the ground. Suddenly, in front of their eyes, in the crowns of a tree, they saw something. There are some children there. Kalia's carriage had not gone that far, and she noticed something was happening. She felt somehow uneasy. What did the prince of the Akan kingdom forget here? The girl remembered the stranger on the balcony. The Akan kingdom is a neutral state bordering the Roxas Empire. He was not interested in wars or economic ties. It has never entered into relations with other countries. Kalia had the opportunity to visit there only once, to purchase goods for military medicine. She remembered her visit and meeting the impudent prince of the Akan kingdom. When they met, he behaved defiantly and kept making vulgar jokes about Kalia, not taking her seriously. The girl even threatened to cut his wrist if he didn't keep his hands to himself. This cannot be ignored, Kalia decided, and asked her companion to stay with the doctor while she sent a message to her receiver in the capital. Kalia decided that it would be better to warn about Prince Akana, just in case. This prince has a black soul. She decided to ask him to secretly tell His Highness about him. She contacted Brick. Before she had time to say a word, he attacked her with questions about where she was now. He said that Simon had put everyone on the spot to find her. Yesterday, after meeting with the crown prince, he immediately rushed to her estate. But upon learning that Kalia was not there, he turned it into ruins. And since last night, he's still been there, not letting anyone get close. First of all, you have to investigate something. Kalia interrupted his story, and she explained that at the moment Prince Akana had arrived in Antique. Brick agreed that this was very suspicious. Kalia told him to definitely find out everything about this and report to the crown prince, but never tell anyone that he contacted her. Simon was back. There was no more time to hesitate. If we go back and this prince recognizes her, the situation will become very complicated. It's better to leave here as soon as possible. Kalia decided everything. She knew what she would do next. Brick, she turned to the warrior. Now go to Simon and tell him that I'm Antique. Hamming Allen, we're leaving now. Kalia shouted and tore another magic scroll. This flight continued for quite a long time. Everyone fell down from fatigue. In just one day, they covered more than 500 kilometers. Kalia felt sorry for her companions, but the situation did not tolerate delay. This went on day after day, until everyone dropped dead. Kalia drove the carriage while everyone rested. She understood that they were very overtired. We've been on the road for several days without rest. They traveled many kilometers with the help of scrolls and a carriage. Simon won't be able to detect me right away. I should also rest, the tired girl decided. On the way, they came across a rural house in which the travelers could find free rooms for rest. The doctor decided to examine Kalia after such a difficult journey. Luckily, he said the baby is growing well. Very little time passed and he was so big. The doctor advised me to take care of myself. Although Kalia's health was not comparable to other women in labor, you should always be careful. The doctor left. Kalia began to think. She wondered if Simon had found those children. She didn't know about the others, but Simon had to see them. The blood of elves allows you to see spirits. Most likely she was able to see those children, thanks to the baby in whom Simon's blood flows. She was worried. If only nothing happened to them. So strange. Although they were far from each other, Simon, on the contrary, began to occupy her thoughts more. Maybe you're thinking about your dad. She turned to her baby. Sorry, baby, Mom really loves Simon, but as a friend and brother. Brothers should value and protect each other, not harm each other. That's why Mom left. Of course I was the first to attack him. The girl remembered that evening. It was just that that day was a little crazy. Mom is not bad at all. Kalia made excuses. If I say that everything happened out of love but coercion is bad. Suddenly she realized something. I didn't force myself on him, did I? Apart from the kiss, Simon was the initiator for everything else. If you think about it, how we burst in, grabbing a rope from the corridor, and what they were doing on the table in the office. Which of the two of us didn't let me breathe even for a minute, as if starved? If you look at it this way, Mommy is not to blame for anything. In the end, Kalia decided. It was hot in the room and the girl decided to go for a walk in the fresh air. How nice it is in the night air. At the same time, antique. Simon stood by a huge tree. Touching it with his hand, he tried to use magic to restore it. But magic won't help him anymore, the guy realized. All the tree needs now is time and fertile soil. And fairy dew created from joy. The sad guy suddenly remembered Kalia. How could she disappear, leaving only this letter? My dear Simon, come to think of it, this is my first time writing you a letter. Just think, in these 20 years we have never exchanged letters. What an unfortunate omission. To tell the truth, if it weren't for that day, we wouldn't have been able to exchange letters or even glances. Still, fate is an interesting thing. The truth is that by saving you from being kidnapped that day, I saved my destiny. I left you without saying a word, but I hope you can understand me. This departure, as on that very day, was promised to me by fate itself. However, I will only say that this decision was made for the sake of me, you and everyone else. And don't waste too much effort on my search. When the time comes, I will return again with something truly amazing. Yes, exactly. I will say it again, but I sincerely apologize for that day. It's too late to talk about this, but you were just super. With love, your Kalia. Simon held the letter with a trembling hand. He really wanted to hear these words from Kalia in person. Suddenly, Brick came and said that he had a message from Mrs. Kalia. Mrs. Kalia is now an antique, the warrior said to Simon. The guy did not hesitate for a second after a few moments. With the help of magic, he moved to the city with a large tree. Where are you, Kalia? He thought, looking around. A terrible picture opened before his eyes. Someone used lightning magic against a tree. He's so busy searching. But who could do this? Simon couldn't help but know a magician of such high class. But among the magicians I know, there are no idiots who can split a fairy tree with lightning. Come to think of it, Kalia wouldn't leave traces so recklessly. There must be a good reason for her to decide to reveal herself. Simon used shield and reflection magic to protect the tree, and he himself followed the trail of dark magic, which led him to that very balcony. Then the guy discovered the mark after the magic of instantaneous movement. Simon. Without hesitation, he used surveillance magic, which led in the footsteps of the mysterious magician. When the guy moved, he suddenly found a lifeless body. Simon couldn't believe his eyes. It was the body of a dead fairy. Demonic beast? He thought in surprise as he examined the magic that had destroyed the magical creature. Derek, it's me. Now follow the scent coordinates and pick up one corpse. Simon sent a message. Returning to the tree in the city of Antique, Simon immediately cast protective shield magic on it. When the guy walked around the tree unexpectedly, he listened to a child's voice that was coming from somewhere above, from the crown of the tree. "The same light emanates from you. Are you elf blood?" "Thank you," said an unfamiliar childish voice. When the guy looked up, he saw 3 little boys on the branches. "Have you by any chance seen Kalia? A very beautiful and strong woman with light green eyes." The guy decided to ask them about the girl. The cookies were delicious. He heard a playful child's voice answer. "The same light from you, as from that beautiful man." The children continued to talk cheerfully, sitting high on the branches. "Beautiful person." The guy realized that we were talking about Kalia. He tried to ask them for details, but right before his eyes they disappeared into thin air, giggling cheerfully. "Wait, ask. Tell us first," Simon shouted after them, realizing that he had just missed the only clue. Crap! Kalia was walking in the fresh air under the starry sky. Suddenly she saw the door to the house open, and Dr. Allen slowly walked out with his eyes closed, muttering something under his breath. Kalia managed to stop him just before the fence. The doctor walked, not noticing anything and no one around, in a sleepy voice, pronouncing the female name Nadia. The girl remembered that she had heard this name before. "Sorry I couldn't protect you." The doctor fell on Kalia's shoulder with tears in his eyes. She didn't understand anything. What's happening to him? Kalia was perplexed. "Sorry, Nadia, sorry for not saving you." He continued to cry on her shoulder. Kalia remembered that that was the name of his late wife. He mistook her for his dead wife. Tears kept rolling down the doctor's cheeks. His vision was so realistic. "Come to your senses, Alan." The girl decided that it was time to bring him to his senses and shook him strongly by the shoulders. The tearful doctor opened his eyes and his eyes widened in surprise. "Mrs. Kalia?" He admitted with shame that he most likely fell asleep and went outside. He explained that when he gets very tired or sick, he sometimes starts sleepwalking. He is almost cured. But over these few days, so much fatigue accumulated that the disease returned again. He was terribly ashamed and asked for forgiveness for appearing in such a disgusting form. Kalia calmed him down and asked him not to worry about it. "Nadia, that was your wife's name?" she asked. "Looks like you still love her very much." Alan didn't know, but even now thinking about her made him feel empty in his heart. He wasn't sad, but he felt a little melancholy. The doctor did not want to remember his wife with sadness. Be that as it may, he wanted her to give him happiness, even if she was not with him. From his words, Kalia was sure that he still loved her very much. It really was like that. "Isn't your child your loved one's?" the doctor asked Kalia. She couldn't say that she didn't love the child's father, but their relationship was too strange to call him beloved. "In that case, it's a friend." Unexpectedly for the girl, the doctor made a conclusion. How did he know? The girl was surprised. No one in the world knew about this. "You are much easier to understand than you think," the doctor said, seeing Kalia's surprise, and asked why she decided to give birth alone. The girl did not want to talk about the reason, but Alan was her doctor, so she opened up to him. For her, this child is a blessing and a miracle. But the child blessed for her may be very different for his father. She just wanted this child to be born in love. "Mrs. Kalia, you will definitely be a good mother." The doctor responded to her words with understanding. In the morning, everyone gathered at the table for breakfast. The polite hostess took care of Kalia and treated her more than anyone else. She was surprised that a pregnant woman was traveling alone without her husband. Kalia knew that this would complicate matters if information leaked here and Simon found out about her pregnancy. "Now I'm on the run from my husband," she said as she walked, making up a sob story. He was always obsessed with drinking and gambling, rarely returned home, and changed girls like gloves. And when he got drunk and raised his hand to me, I couldn't stand it anymore and ran away. The hostess was amazed and insulted her husband in every possible way, expressing her support. Finally, Kalia asked if suddenly someone was looking for her, that this meeting would be kept secret. Returning home, Simon could not find a place for himself. All his thoughts were only about Kalia. He didn't understand her action. "Damn it, where did you go? Our relationship meant so little that you left without saying a word? 3 days have already passed." At this rate, the guy thought he would soon lose his mind. A little bit later, Simon came to the imperial palace to see the crown prince. "Found Kalia?" the prince asked the guy. From his sad face, he understood the answer without words. The prince noticed that Simon had lost a lot of weight since Kalia left. It would be bad if Simon also left the imperial family. You said you found a strange corpse? I heard that he looks like one of the fairy race, the prince asked the magician. But he could not say for sure that this was really the case. The prince said that he had recently received a strange report, which said that a foreign aristocrat had bought the ancient fortress of the empire. The fortress is located in the vicinity of the fairy forest. The problem was that there were rumors about this aristocrat that he had a hobby of collecting fairies. Simon knew it himself, but there was a time when people were hostile to other races. However, this was a very long story. Thanks to the treaty, now everyone can coexist together, and elves and fairies have become untouchable races for humans. Maybe these are just rumors, but for the sake of maintaining good relations, we cannot close our eyes to this, the prince said and added the following words. So that's what I'm talking about. You could personally go and investigate everything. But unexpectedly for the prince, Simon answered not at all as he expected. He could understand that the prince had hidden Kalia's absence from him at her request. Her will is unshakable. In addition, the prince had a special weakness for her. Simon could understand this with his mind, but his heart refused to accept the truth. Therefore, for some time, the magician refused to take on the affairs of the imperial family. Although they were considered the imperial magical order, the magic tower's activities had long gone beyond the imperial borders. It can be said that we supplied you with magic, guided only by patriotism and devotion, Simon said with respect to the astonished prince. Although it sounded rude, there wasn't much patriotism left in him now. As for his devotion, its object was definitely not here now. The prince was amazed. He's already apologized so many times. Simon was adamant. An apology is not a spell that will bring you back to the past. He said one last thing to the prince and left, leaving the prince alone. Simon left the prince filled with anger and resentment. Not only did the prince hide the news of his resignation, but he also decided to send him on a business trip. It was too much. The guy was very angry. He understood that the search for Kalia was urgent. Under no circumstances should you take on another matter. Simon headed to the underground laboratory of the magic tower, where his employees were examining the corpse of an unknown creature he had found. They have not identified the woman. They needed more time to investigate, but they found many strange traces. The bloodstains were very similar to fairy blood, but the structure of the organs was closer to that of a human. Her external characteristics could even be compared with Banshee, but it was difficult to talk about the similarity, since Banshee has a rougher appearance. A Banshee is a female fairy of a vile appearance who warns with her howl of the death of a family member. The fluctuations in magical power left on the corpse were also a little peculiar. Considering how chaotic her magical power was, it can be assumed that she was completely incapable of handling it. Simon didn't understand what kind of creature it was. He was very surprised by what he heard. Fairies control their innate magical powers as naturally as they breathe. Looking at the corpse, he realized that Theon was right. The magical power was in complete disarray. It was as if someone had forcibly injected magical power into her. What is the conclusion? Simon asked the confused assistants, who did not know how to answer the Archmage's question. One way or another. Basically, it's a corpse. That's all one of them could say. Simon thought for a long time, standing over the corpse, and suddenly understood. Chimera. They discovered the corpse of a chimera. The guy's thoughts flashed through the prince's words about a recently received report, which spoke of a foreign aristocrat who bought an ancient fortress near the fairy forest, and about rumors about him. Crap! All that remains is to accept his offer. It had been 4 years since they had passed through this village in the mountains. Then Kalia could not even imagine that she would return here with Simon's child in her belly. Life hits her in the gut when she lets her guard down, and every time something happens that Kalia could not even imagine. It was amazing and a little scary. But now she was looking forward to surprises. How will you surprise me this time? Lua is a beautiful city in the south of the country. On the streets, they gossiped about a girl named Leah, who moved to the estate a month ago. She had come a long way in search of the homeland of her deceased husband. Everyone recognized that she brought good luck to their city. Since she appeared here, they were no longer attacked by goblins and ogres. The servant brought Kalia a fresh newspaper. When she unfolded it, she saw a photo of Simon and a huge article, and it was silent. It talked about the controversy that unfolded around his person. On the 28th, Princess Luina's father's naval fleet invaded Simon's domain, resulting in severe damage to the magical barrier. Simon reported a barrier malfunction, but couldn't this be called revenge? At the same time, he was harshly criticized by Princess Luina, whom he rejected. It is obvious that her statement in the spirit, "He may be interested in men," were intended to bring down the mood of Duke Simon. What is he even thinking about? Kalia thought after reading it. She understood that if nothing unusual had happened, he would not have been included in the messenger. It was as if he was doing this on purpose so that he would be noticed. And for the third time. A few weeks ago she read that Simon still destroyed the palace because she left secretly. It was like Simon with his vile character. It's good that the magicians quickly restored him. After that, a day later, Haeming rushed over with a new newspaper in which the main news was that Simon had completely released his magical power. Kalia was amazed. It was written there that due to overload he lay in a coma for 3 days. The radius of its complete release exceeded the record of 800 kilometers recorded in historical records and amounted to more than 1,000 kilometers. To fully release the power for a magician is the same as squeezing out every drop of blood. What was he thinking? Kalia was indignant. She suspected that he did this to find her. Risk your life to find just a friend. What a brat, how angry he was. A real psycho. Well, yes, when a friend unexpectedly announces his resignation and disappears without a word, he certainly will not sit idly by. Kalia thought about Simon. However, she did not understand why look for her, thus exposing herself to danger. "Baby, just look. This is what your father is like," she addressed her child. "Not only is he strange, he also has a nasty nature. Perhaps he will not stop using all means and methods until he finds me. Well, let him do what he wants. Mommy is very good at hiding." Haeming went into the kitchen to get food for the mistress, and she brought a whole turkey for Kalia. She arrived just in time, because Kalia was very hungry, even though she had eaten her fill 3 hours ago. The girl wanted to cut it to make it more convenient for the lady, but Kalia decided to do it herself, and taking a knife she did it in a couple of moments. The doctor was very worried. He came to say goodbye before his temporary departure and found this picture. He was worried that Kalia was eating more and more every day. He said that pregnant women need to be wary of many things, including diabetes and obesity. "And it is at this moment that I need to leave," he grumbled as he left the house with a suitcase. After lunch, the girls went for a walk around the city. With the arrival of spring, a festival was held in Lua. Kalia thought that she had never been to any festival. It was like she was in a dream. There was no need to worry about how to survive or kill the enemy. She only felt calm. Except for Simon. Kalia was told that he visited the school of knights founded by her every day. Why did he go on the front page of newspapers? Kalia didn't understand what was going on inside his soul. 5th month of pregnancy. The doctor covered Kalia with a blanket and grumpily said that the most important thing in pregnancy is the prenatal education of the baby. If possible, she should look only at beautiful things, listen only to good things, and eat only healthy foods. The baby in the belly perceives together with the mother everything that she sees and feels. So he decided to read a fairy tale to the baby while Kalia rested. But she insisted that she wanted to do it herself. They say that a baby in the stomach better perceives a man's father's voice. But since the doctor was not the father of Kalia's child, she decided that it was better for him to listen to his mother's voice. Dr. Allen realized that it was better not to insist and saying goodnight left. He walked out the door and thought, yes, he was not the father of this child. During the time spent together without realizing it, he again mistakenly felt like a father. But Mrs. Kalia was right. He is no longer a father. He could never be one again. But even so, thanks to you, I knew the happiness of Nadia. Kalia sat down more comfortably and began to read out loud so that the baby could hear her voice well. There lived in one village a bear cub. All his friends were surprised when they saw the rough skin on his paws and the fur scorched by the sun. The little bear had neither a good sword, nor strong shoes, nor a beautiful hat that would hide from the sun, like his friends. But one day a huge hurricane hit the little bear's village. The hurricane carried away all the swords, shoes, and hats of the animals. The animals were disappointed in God. And then God appeared and spoke. I gave you everything and took nothing back. You just didn't want to see it. The animals tried to understand God's words. And then they saw a bear cub who got food. He learned to survive using only his 4 paws. And only then did the animals realize that their claws were sharper than a sword. Paws are faster than anything. And eyes can look far. And only now the little bear realized that he had so much, although he thought that he had nothing. And the fact that he can become anyone, having strong paws, keen eyes, and painstakingly accumulated wisdom, The bear cub set off on a journey, and after that he grew up big and skillful and became the strongest bear in the world. The girl finished reading the fairy tale and turned to the baby. "My baby, did you hear Mommy's voice well? Now it's time to sleep." Kalia left the book near the bedside table and thought about it. She always took out the photograph before going to bed, but today the girl was tormented by her conscience for some reason. Although he is a father, he is not one, all for the sake of prenatal education. And she took Simon's photograph in her hands. To think so, it would be bad if the child was born like him. But if not, it would be a shame, she thought, looking at the photo. If only you were a little like me, a little like Simon. She dreamed of stroking the child through her big belly. Suddenly, everything around her disappeared somewhere. She heard Simon calling her name and found herself next to him in an unfamiliar place filled with bright light. The guy hugged her waist and she realized with horror that her stomach was gone. "My child," she said in a frightened voice in Simon's arms. "Do you want to have a baby?" he asked in an unexpectedly gentle voice, looking straight into your eyes. "Should we try? I also want to see what our child will be like," the guy said, gently stroking her. She threw herself into his arms and he, looking with a languid gaze, continued. "Kalia, I really want to. So this is a dream." The girl suddenly understood when their lips met for a kiss. "Whatever, Simon, I wanted a child, it wasn't real." After a passionate kiss, the guy continued to say that he was bored and going crazy with melancholy. "Please come back, I'll be nice to you. I won't say a bad word, please come back to me." "I dreamed about this for you," Kalia thought in a passionate embrace. No, how could she want this from him? The one who has been like a brother to her since childhood. This is not what she wanted at all. But she seemed to really feel the warmth of his skin. I felt his love in every cell. Is this really a dream? That's right, of course it's a dream. So that Simon would be in love with me, Kalia thought, unable to stop kissing him. This will never happen. Oh! Kalia jumped up abruptly on the bed. What's the matter? How could one discredit the body in which a child is growing with such a vulgar dream? She reproached herself. She soon explained this to herself that this was a natural phenomenon due to the influence of hormones, and the fact that Simon appeared in a dream was because she looked at his photograph before going to bed. Sorry, Mommy didn't do it on purpose. Getting out of bed, Kalia turned to the child. It was still very early when Kalia went down to the kitchen where the cook was preparing breakfast. She was very surprised by the hostess's early arrival and offered breakfast, but the girl decided to wait until the others woke up so that they could all have breakfast together. Watching her make juice, Kalia thought that this woman had 5 children. The girl asked if it was noisy at home because of this. Just noisy? Sometimes my eardrums burst. The cook answered, laughing, and she lovingly talked about her usual day, when the children constantly quarrel and fight among themselves. And yet you look like a friendly family. Kalia answered this thoughtfully. The woman looked understandingly and unexpectedly asked Kalia, "Maybe you want to ask something?" "What? No!" The girl screamed in surprise, her face red with shame. To be honest, she didn't know if it was possible to ask about such things. But this woman had 5 children and a lot of experience, so Kalia decided that maybe she could explain it to her. "Don't hesitate to ask," the cook offered in a friendly manner. Plucking up courage and burning with shame, the girl said, "Yesterday I had a dream with the child's father. This is the first time I have dreamed about this, and I was wondering if this is a common phenomenon. I can't imagine why I dreamed this. But this makes me very strange and ashamed. Dream about a child's father. What dream?" At first, woman A didn't understand her. Such a dream. Suddenly, she understood everything. Kalia was overcome with shame, and the woman laughingly explained that everyone sometimes has such dreams, and there is nothing wrong with that. Still, pregnancy is a strange thing. Kalia thought she had stirred up more than she intended, but still she was told that there was nothing shameful in sex. The girl thought about it. Who told her this? Those were Simon's words. Still, it was strange. Even being away from him, she constantly thought about him. Maybe I was bewitched. Do you see? The outlines of his head and legs are gradually becoming visible. And here between the legs you see a round thing. Dr. Allen conducted another examination and showed Kalia what her child looks like now. She was wildly delighted. "Oh my God, my baby is so cute, cute, too cute." The doctor said she was having a boy. Kalia couldn't pull herself together. "So cute it drives me crazy." "No, do you see this? I thought children usually couldn't see anything there. My baby is incredible. God, look at the pose. Why is he so seasoned? What a brat." The excited girl did not calm down. The doctor barely calmed her down. Kalia shouldn't have been so worried. He was already worried. The child's development at 9 months exceeded all indicators. Now he weighs almost 4 kilograms. But if this continues, then by the day of birth his weight may approach 5 kilograms. Such a large baby can endanger the mother in labor. But Kalia did not understand the danger. She was glad that her baby was growing so well. The doctor tried to explain the threat. The fact is that no matter how superhuman strength and endurance she possessed, when giving birth to such a large child, one slightest mistake could lead to her death. Moreover, not only the baby has grown. Kalia also gained more than 14 kilograms. It was unhealthy. The doctor's words cut to the quick. Sweets are temporarily prohibited, the doctor added to the girl. Seeing how his words upset her, he allowed sweets only for the duration of the festival. Kalia, along with the doctor and Haiming, walked along the lawn, which was covered in flowers, after which the festival was named. They enjoyed their beauty and everyone was in a great mood. Haiming suggested taking a walk around the fairy forest area later. It was usually closed to entry. But during the festival, in a special order, access to it was opened under the supervision of security. Many people came to see the magical forest. Mrs. Kalia, they sell desserts there? Would you like to try it? Suddenly the girl suggested to her mistress. The doctor was shocked. As soon as they arrived, they immediately ran for desserts. The doctor suggested that Kalia often attended such festivals. But this was new to her. She had to fight all the time during her travels. I haven't been to festivals, but I've seen a lot of funerals. She answered sadly for a moment and began to eat her dessert. She really was happy here and now. But where does this feeling of emptiness come from? As if she left something behind. This can't be true. She had nothing to leave in those parts. Simon suddenly woke up and opened his eyes. Kalia! He dreamed about her again. Even in his sleep, he felt the warmth of her body so clearly. Where is she? Come back, please. Simon was tormented after sleep. He even decided to tie her up the next time they met and set up a magical barrier so that she could never leave him again. Shouldn't we publish an article saying that I'm dying? Jumping up on the bed, the guy suddenly thought, no. What will he do if she doesn't come back even after this? He thought that by remaining friends, he could continue to be close to her. But that didn't work either. Both the title of Archmage and the nickname of Genius were achieved in order to be close to her. Without her, there is no place for happiness or pleasure in his life. From the moment she saved his life, Simon belonged to her alone. Why don't you notice this alone, Kalia? The sad guy was thinking. Looking at the case with the pink pearl, he asked himself a question. Would it have changed anything if I hadn't hesitated and plucked up the courage to hand it over to Kalia? Simon recalled his business trip during which he bought this pearl. He, along with his Order of Magicians, which was subordinate to the imperial family, set out to restore the magic circle of the support circle in the port. The business trip was scheduled for a month, but Simon reduced it to 2 weeks. He wanted to return to Kalia as soon as possible. All the magicians who were with him fell off their feet from such a pace. Derek, an 8th-level mage, was lost in thought. He didn't understand how he could fail like that. This scroll was the crown of his creation. He heard that after using it, a rope was found in the bedroom and hung as decoration in the hall. Really? Being familiar with magical attributes, Mrs. Kalia got angry and tied up Mr. Simon. But he dismissed the thought. If something serious had happened, the Archmage would have eaten him whole. The guy decided to finish his business and get to work on the scroll when he returned. Passing by a jewelry store, the magician saw that there was a pink pearl for sale. Simon became interested, and they explained to him that the pink pearl is mined only in this area and is considered extremely rare. This jewel is loved very much here, so it rarely leaves this region. Either way, it's a useless gem. He will roll around the house, Simon thought at first. One of his magicians said that he had also heard about her. This is a very beautiful and expensive pearl. But that's not all. Here it means eternal love and a happy family. The magician continued to tell his friends. They even say that the one who received it will die on the same day, at the same hour as the one who gave it. Suddenly, they saw Simon walk into the shop without saying a word. A minute later, he came out with the pearl in his hands. "Let's go," he said dryly to the surprised guys. Eternal love, a happy family, and the opportunity to die together on the same day in the same hour. Simon was wondering how best to present it when he returned tomorrow. He wanted to see Kalia as soon as possible. The festival was in full swing. "The picture won't work if you're dozing." Suddenly, the artist said to Kalia, who was posing for him on a chair. Haeming was snoring nearby, and she herself offered to paint a portrait. Kalia liked this girl. She did not stop training her. Haeming understood that after giving birth, the mistress would not be able to pay much attention to her training, and tried to get the maximum from each training session. She was very devoted to her mistress. Ever since Kalia helped her, she was determined to follow only her. She has little experience in combat, but she has talent. Kalia was distracted from her thoughts by a loud child's cry. The child ran and called his mother in a frightened voice. The girl ran up to her mother and with tears in her eyes told her that 2 of her friends had entered the fairy forest alone. The mother told the child to run to Aunt McKenna and tell everything, and she went to the guards. McKenna! Kalia realized that they were talking about her cook's daughter. With a sharp push, she woke up Haeming. They urgently needed to return home. The doctor, leaving the patient, suddenly saw with horror how they were running as fast as they could down the street. He was furious. This is dangerous. But they explained that something bad had happened. Kalia heard that Mrs. McKenna's daughter entered the fairy forest. Returning home, they met an upset woman who asked to go home because something had happened at home. Kalia told the girl and the doctor to immediately go to the security and monitor the situation. When did the children enter the forest, and how much is already known about their whereabouts? She herself promised to stay at home until they returned. When they returned, they said that it was already 2 hours since the children disappeared. They climbed over the fence in search of a ball stuck in a tree of the fairy forest. That's how they went inside. The remaining child immediately ran to his mother. 2 hours. Kalia was thinking about everything. It's too early to give up the search. But what if during this time they went far into the deep forest? Even adults find it difficult to return from this forest. The likelihood of their return in this case is almost 0. The doctor learned that the guards would recruit people and go in search of the children. It will be sunset very soon. And after sunset, the forest of fairies is more terrible than the domain of demonic creatures. Kalia understood that people would enter the forest only with help, but since there were no volunteers, they would only stall for time. And the next day the parents themselves will go in search. Of course, Mrs. McKenna will be among them. The doctor asked cautiously if he wasn't going to, in which case Kalia would go to such a dangerous place herself. Kalia knew this. The fairy forest is extremely dangerous, but for ordinary people. The girl understood that when the sun set, she could assume that the children would no longer be found. Even she will have a hard time coping with the forest at night. However, the only person in the entire village who is able to save the children is her. She had the strength and ability to start searching right away. She couldn't sit silently and wait. If this had happened earlier, she would not have hesitated for a second, even if she had no power. If her child was locked in the fairy forest, she would rush to save him. As long as there is hope that the child is alive, Kalia would rush off into the forest no matter what dangers await her. The girl understood that most likely Mrs. McKenna thought the same thing. I've spent enough time thinking. Haeming, Alan, I have to ask you. Alan, wait for me at the entrance to the forest. Dr. Allen was very concerned about Kalia's decision to go into the fairy forest in search of children. The girl tried to calm him down, saying that everything would be fine. She added that the children hardly reached the deep forest, and there were no demonic creatures in this forest. And if you are careful with illusions, then there is no threat. Kalia told the doctor about this, who believed that this was a very dangerous idea. The girl asked him not to worry as much as illusions did not affect her. She couldn't explain the reason and asked me to just trust her. Besides, she had instant travel scrolls. He didn't need to worry too much. And the girl added that she was not going to go alone. Kalia turned to her assistant and asked her forgiveness for asking her to take this dangerous path with her. After all, she was the only person Kalia trusted the most. Haeming, will you come with me? She asked the dumbfounded girl. With joy, she replied. Security stood at the entrance to the forest and did not let people in. Parents with tears in their eyes begged to be let in. They wanted to go in search of their little children themselves. The security did not let anyone in, explaining that a search party was already being recruited for this purpose. But this did not reassure the parents. They understood that the sun would soon set before the authorities gathered a detachment and sent it on a search. Kalia and her assistant walked past the crowd of indignant crowds. Haeming did not understand why nothing could be done with the fairy forest if it was so dangerous for people. The best way would be to come to an agreement with the owner of the forest. However, the inhabitants of the forest did not want to make contact with people. The king of the fairy race was very hostile towards humans, and the fairies themselves had a special and frightening power. The fairy forest spread everywhere like blood vessels, flowing towards the center, the deep forest. It is impossible to control so many areas. Therefore, everything was limited to a fence and a warning sign. But even this was monitored only in big cities. In small villages, the fence may be destroyed and the warning sign may come off. And there are a lot of places like this that are easy to break. Kalia said this when they approached the damaged part of the stone fence, and she showed the assistant to the fence. The girls entered the fairy forest, moving further and further deeper. Have we gone too deep? Haiming began to worry, looking around. Kalia reassured her. The main thing was not to get lost in the illusion, but otherwise it's not that dangerous here. At least until sunset. Although Kalia told the girl that everything was fine, she was worried about the footprints found near the entrance. If her memory served her correctly, then these were lichen wolves, and judging by the fact that they entered the forest, they were expelled from the pack. Kalia realized that there were 1 or 2 of them, or at most 3 individuals. In her current state, it would be difficult to cope with an entire flock. She could handle 2 or 3. Walking carefully, Kalia suddenly realized that something was wrong here. She heard that fairies hate demonic creatures, even stronger than people, so they do not allow them into their territory. Suddenly, the girl asked about those recent tracks, whether they belonged to demonic beasts. She noticed them too as they passed by. Kalia replied that everything was fine. Haiming understood that her mistress was not in the right position now and volunteered to protect her. Her abilities were useless, but she offered herself as a human shield. Suddenly, Kalia heard something and turned around. Suddenly, a fierce demonic creature appeared in front of her. Haiming was speechless and could not move from fear. Kalia did not lose her composure. She calmly used her sword. She looked at the beast with a confident gaze. The girl noticed that his eyes were rolled back and his whole body was wounded. Something was wrong with his condition. Maybe he really went crazy, Kalia thought. She deftly delivered another blow, after which the beast disappeared into the thick of the forest. With such a wound he won't get far, the girl thought. Still, with the body of a demonic beast, he would not be able to go deep. He had nowhere to run. Haiming was shocked by the coolness of her mistress. She realized that she had done the right thing by following Kalia. A little later, making their way through the forest, the girls came to an unusual clearing with huge mushrooms. These were mushrooms of illusions. Because of his arguments, people began to see hallucinations. It grew only in the forest of fairies and was much larger than one could imagine. With such a size, it could be considered a demonic creature. Since its spores caused hallucinations, if it was cut down, the effect of illusions in this place would be greatly weakened. But it was better, just in case, not to approach the mushroom at all. The fact is that if the illusion lures you closer to the mushroom, spores will pour in on you. And having gotten dirty in them, a person loses his mind. You will die right on the spot and the mushroom will use your corpse as fertilizer. Kalia warned her assistant about this. So be careful. Before Kalia had time to finish speaking, she suddenly saw something strange. A strange girl stood behind the tree and peeked at them. She didn't even try to go unnoticed. Vice versa. What's the matter? Kalia froze in place, looking at the strange stranger. Mistress Kalia, what's the matter? Asked Haiming, seeing the strange behavior of her mistress. Kalia asked if she had seen the woman, who just stood there and pointed to a place under the tree. But the surprised girl saw nothing. She suggested that maybe it was an illusion, but Kalia replied that the illusions of this place show what you desire most, or who you miss most. But the fairy that Kalia saw did not seem familiar to her. Most likely she lived in this forest. But it was strange that an adult fairy was wandering through the forest alone. Today was full of strange things. The fairy race has a strong sense of cohesion, so they are rarely seen alone. Then maybe there are other fairies nearby. Suddenly the girl became suspicious and began to look around. Then, fixing her gaze on the place where she saw the fairy, Kalia thought, it's strange why she was there. Looking behind the tree, she saw her again. Kalia thought the fairy had disappeared, but she came even closer. Still so clumsy. Kalia asked Haiming if she could see the girl, pointing to the fairy behind the tree. But Haiming saw nothing. Behind a tree? There's nothing there, she replied. Is this really an illusion? Kalia came closer. She didn't understand what was wrong with this fairy. It didn't look like she was trying to hide. If it were up to her, she would have dealt with it instantly or forced herself to reveal it. But now the first thing was to find the children. Therefore, Kalia turned around sharply and went to her assistant. A little further in the forest, the tracks of the beast ended. Kalia heard a voice from the other side and a subtle smell of blood. First, we needed to check that place. Suddenly, someone took Kalia by the hand. What does it mean? A thought flashed through her head, and she felt strange sensations in her stomach. Turning around, she saw that the same fairy was holding her hand. When did she sneak up? And why does the child react to her presence? The fairy just stood there and held the girl's hand. It was not clear what she was doing. Haiming also did not understand why her mistress stopped so abruptly. Is this the same fairy you were talking about? She guessed it. You can't talk? Asked Kalia, looking into the fairy's eyes. The fairy made it clear that she could not do it for a long time. Kalia didn't have time to play with her. She had to look for the missing children. Kalia realized that the fairy wanted to trick her. The girl agreed to follow her. But if there were no children there, she promised to destroy the fairy. Kalia wondered why this happened. Following an unknown fairy is a risk in itself. But the girl wanted to believe her. They came out into a beautiful clearing which was buried in a sea of flowers. This place was fabulously beautiful. There were many small spirits circling around. The spirits immediately began to tickle Haiming. Kalia was surprised that the girl sees spirits, but at the same time does not see the fairy. Fairies are clearly superior to spirits in power. Where are the children? Asked the fairy Kalia. And the spirits whispered something in the fairy's ear, and in response she grabbed her hand again, trying to take her somewhere else. Kalia was losing patience. They had no time at all. They urgently needed to find out where the children were now. The fairy was also not going to give up and did not let go of her hand. Suddenly, Kalia saw the trail of an animal among the trampled flowers. These were the same tracks. Kalia called Haiming and the girls moved on, leaving the fairy in the flower meadow. They had already wandered further than Kalia had planned. It was already about 5 o'clock in the evening. Despite the delay, Kalia did not feel heavy. Since they entered the forest, the body seemed to become lighter. Kalia also took with her a scroll of instant movement. If you move as soon as they find the children, you can leave the forest before dusk. Kalia remembered Simon's words about how magical power behaved strangely in the fairy forest. You have to be careful when using magic. He said that if an ordinary person who does not know how to control magical power uses the scroll, it can bend space and provoke an explosion. Since she was always by his side, she had nothing to worry about. It was necessary to remember him in such a situation. On their way, the entrance to a cave appeared and the girls decided that they were on the right path. Kalia entered first, but an insurmountable magical barrier appeared in front of the girl. Haiming seemed to be repelled by something. Kalia realized that this must be the very place. Border of the deep forest. It was like a magical barrier created by fairies. Then how did you manage to get through? The girl wondered. Kalia agreed with her. It really was somehow strange. What was also strange was that behind the barrier there were also animal tracks and bloodstains. If this was the territory of the fairy domain, then the demonic beasts could not set foot on it. What is that sound? Kalia suddenly heard something. Haiming could not leave her mistress in such a situation and tried to force her way through the fairy's magical barrier. He did not give in. But suddenly Kalia extended her hand and pulled the girl inside without any effort. Haiming was very happy that she managed to break through. But there was no time to think about how they managed it. It was necessary to move on. Is she already coming here? He promised to go after her and returned so late. But we can only see each other once a year, the guy said to the white bird. Looks like you found Gaia. Gaia came out of the forest and saw him. She was overwhelmed with joy, and without holding back, she immediately rushed into his arms. The father hugged his daughter with tenderness. He asked forgiveness for arriving so late, but on the other hand, he prepared her a birthday present that was sure to surprise her. But the girl's reaction was not quite what he expected. Gaia began to pull him somewhere, not paying attention to the gift. He will accompany her wherever she wants to go. At this time, the girls were moving forward in a dark cave. Haiming was worried that it was too dark inside and it was dangerous to just move on like that. The assistant was worried about the expectant mother. The girl offered to stand in front of Kalia and act as a shield, in case someone dangerous suddenly jumped out. Kalia thanked the girl for her care and courage. But such a sacrifice was not required of her. Kalia asked the assistant to close her eyes for a while. She took something out of her bag and threw it in front of her. Immediately, the entire cave was filled with bright light. It was the pearl of light that Kalia took with her. Kalia took the pearl of light with her and told Haeming that she would go there and back. I asked her to look around for now, to see if there were any demonic beasts nearby. It was necessary to end everything quickly. Swinging her sword, Kalia tried to illuminate the cave as far as possible. Suddenly, she saw demonic beasts. They wanted to escape using one of the children as a hostage. They tried to stab the girl with their deadly sharp claws, but she dodged it with a deft movement and was able to free the boy. Next, she immediately struck the beast, which tried to escape. Stained with his blood, she thought that she could destroy them right there on the spot, tearing them to shreds if not for the child. She remembered her child and scolded herself that she should only think about good things. In her thoughts, she asked her child for forgiveness. The second beast attacked from behind and tried to take the girl by surprise. Kalia deftly dodged the fatal blow. Apparently, this was the last one. Kalia began to think, maybe they could catch him alive. If Simon were here, he could get at least some information. If you cut off the beast's limbs, it won't be difficult to catch it. She thought about her next actions. Suddenly, the wolf was pierced by a spear from nowhere. Kalia looked up and saw a huge stranger. A fairy she already knew jumped out from behind him and began to hug her tenderly. "Who are you?" asked the stranger while his daughter was caressing Kalia's belly. Kalia introduced herself as he removed his spear from the dead body. With the help of magic, he extracted something else incomprehensible. What is he doing? As soon as the girl had time to think, he, as if hearing her thoughts, began to explain. This is a contaminated fairy stone. Unhappy soul. These are fairies who cannot find peace even after death. Are these demonic beasts fairies? Thought Kalia, looking at the terrible, defeated beast. The stranger continued and said that someone was forcibly tearing out the hearts of fairies while they were still alive and transplanting them into demonic creatures. People like you, he turned to the girl, call them chimeras. It was unthinkable. Kalia didn't know what to say. He said that this has been happening for quite some time. Chimera. Some called it dark magic. Others called it divine medicine that prolongs life. An attractive but at the same time forbidden activity that encourages dangerous actions. The magicians and scientists who studied the chimeras were overcome by madness, and they lost all will to live. It was the fruit of human sin and cruelty, in which only a person could show interest. Leah thought that the closest village to this place was Lua. There was a very high probability that the creatures came from there. But in a tiny village, there would not be a person who would commit such an atrocity. Moreover, it was not possible that she would not have noticed the blast wave from the magical power released when creating the chimera. "Are you okay?" the fairy asked, gently stroking Kalia, trying to dispel her heavy thoughts. Why does this fairy show such concern? Kalia asked the stranger about this. She already understood who he is. Only he could have owned this spear. Father of all things. Guardian and judge. A fairy king named Calaxisa. The fairy race takes a very long time to conceive an offspring. Over the course of 5 years, it develops in the stomach, and can only be born after it creates the fairy stone. The fairy stone that all fairies have is a fusion of pure power. Usually it is formed with growth, but there are very rare cases when the fairy stone does not keep up with physical development. His youngest daughter was just like that. She was born after 8 long years, although compared to her brothers she was born tiny and very weak. But she was the smartest, gentlest, and sweetest child of all. That's why he always worried about his youngest. Although he, as a father, obliged to patronize everyone equally, should not have done so. But he loved her and took care of her more than anyone else. One day, when she grew up, she came to her father and said that she fell in love with a man. He was very upset by this, and warned Gaia that human life is ridiculously short and weak. "This will only bring you suffering," her father told her. But she did not pay attention to his requests and did not listen to her father. "I love him," she answered. She wanted to live her life with him even if it was short. This was her destiny. It didn't stop her that her father was categorically against it. Losing patience, he told her to leave and not even think about coming back until she realized how stupid she had been. You shouldn't have let her go then. After a while, the father regretted his words. His beloved daughter died, and he still could not forgive himself for allowing her to go alone to an unfamiliar place. "This child is a fragment of my dead daughter. More precisely, a fragment of her soul," the fairy king began to explain. "These fairy domains are overflowing with the power of giving birth to spirits and are capable, to one degree or another, of maintaining their form with the help of a fragment of the soul. He also added that a fairy born from a fragment of a soul can only be seen by those who are connected to it. "Now it's your turn to answer," the king said menacingly, pointing his spear at Kalia. "Who are you?" Suddenly Gaia stepped forward, shielding the girl, and then she attacked her surprised father, protecting Kalia from him. "What's going on here?" The girl didn't understand. For some reason she felt warmth from her touch. Who is this fairy to protect her? The father tried to calm his daughter down and asked for forgiveness for his behavior, admitting that he was wrong and was in a hurry. Suddenly Kalia heard a familiar voice calling her for help. Haiming, she thought. The girl was sitting at the entrance to the cave with wounded children in her arms. "Please, hold on a little longer," she whispered. She quickly stopped the bleeding, but she needed to save them until she returned to the village. There was also this huge egg, which was held tightly by a little unconscious girl. Haiming was wondering what to do. The lady was still in the cave. She couldn't rely only on her mistress all the time. Now she must protect the children herself. Suddenly, the girl saw that a demonic beast had crept very close, ready to kill them at any moment. She managed to call Kalia for help and was petrified in horror. The wolf was too close for her to use the sword. It was already too late to grab the sword. She no longer thought about herself. She wanted to protect at least the children. Suddenly, the egg flashed brightly and illuminated the space around with a bright light, blinding everyone around and frightening the wolf. Did the egg protect us now? Haiming didn't understand what was happening. The next moment, Kalia appeared and struck the beast with a piercing blow. "Haiming, are you okay?" Kalia was worried. She replied that she was fine, but it was worth worrying about the children. They suffered much more. Kalia reassured the girl. The wounds were not deep, but they absorbed the demonic energy of these creatures. If they don't get rid of it now, their lives will be in jeopardy. "Are these the children you came for?" asked the fairy king. He also noticed that their wounds were covered with dense demonic energy. He used his magic to save them, and soon the bad energy dissipated. Without listening to the words of gratitude from Kalia, he said that these children managed to find a thing much worse than demonic beasts, and pointed with a spear at the egg in the hands of the little girl. Kalia just noticed him. "This is a dragon egg," she thought. Abandoned dragon eggs are quite common, but not in the fairy forest. Kalia knew that dragons do not make friends with fairies, and it is unlikely that they would abandon him here. The king said, "Give me this egg. Without a mother, it will die. It's only a matter of time. I will finish him myself." Without a mother, is it just a matter of time? Kalia pondered the words of the fairy king. "No, this egg protected us," Haiming screamed with the children in her arms. Kalia didn't understand how you could simply kill an egg that wanted to live so badly. She was sure that if she stubbornly held on and floundered with all her might, she could survive. She was proof of that. Therefore, she decided to object to the king. "We'll take this egg," she said. This was not a creature that people could control. The king was confident. "He is destined for death anyway. You yourself understand that it would be more humane to calm him down in peace now." The king did not want to accept refusal. "I know," said Kalia, but she couldn't let him die like that. Both she and this dragon egg were thrown against their will. She had no choice. She wanted to live only because she was born, and she fought with all her might because she wanted to live. Kalia said that the egg wants to live, so she will never give it up. The king didn't even want to listen. Without magical power, it will die and they will not be able to provide it. Nobody wanted to give in to the argument. The situation was already getting out of control. The king was already ready to destroy the egg, even with the girl. Suddenly, the fairy again came to Kalia's defense. Gaia used all her strength without sparing herself to protect the girl and the egg from her father. Kalia didn't understand why she was making such sacrifices for her. The king also thought about this and calmed down. "It seems to me that there is something in you and an unusual light of the soul emanates from your child," said the king, and wiped a drop of blood from the wound on Kalia's face. "Do what you want with this egg," he suddenly said, and ordered the Fairy of Night and Starry Light to lead these children out of the forest. The time of fairy darkness was about to come. It was time for them to return. After thanking the king, they, under the protection of the fairy with black eyes, began their return home. Suddenly, Kalia felt that someone was holding her hand again. When she turned around, she saw Gaia looking worried. "Go together. I have to go with you," she said to the surprised girl. Late at night, Simon studied the documents with the help of magic. From them, he learned about other people's notes, which said that huge amounts of money could be earned from selling fairies. Crazy aristocrats are ready to pay large sums for them. I'm told they can be found if you search the outskirts of the fairy forest. We will be able to catch them without the fairy king knowing. Crown Prince? He's not even an emperor. Where does he get his powers from? Of course, if the damned Duke of Archmage Simon is not nearby. According to rumors, General Kalia is also missing. Fairies have amazing powers that can cure all diseases. Marquise of Ayanti, Simon thought as he studied the notes. The Marquise's actions had looked suspicious lately. As expected, he was doing strange things. Just a year ago, his limb was consumed by disease, causing even the bones to rot. But recently, surprisingly, he has been on the mend. This is not a disease that can be cured so easily, the guy thought. Suddenly, he called on his magical pets and ordered them to spray something in the cities he pointed to. Simon was glad that all this time, without regret, he fed them magical power. This time they will be able to climb further than last time. Suddenly his face darkened. He remembered her again. Kalia, how far have you run? Every memory of you brings me agony. He was very bored and so angry that he was ready to destroy everything around him. If this goes on, I'll really go crazy. No, he couldn't afford it yet. No way until I find you and tie you to me. And yet my labors were not in vain. I finally found a clue about you. This noble lady had light yellow hair. She was always accompanied by a cute girl with a bob. And there was another satellite. A very tall and noble-looking handsome man. I remember because I was amazed at how caring he was towards Mrs. Simon found a man who could help him a lot with the search for Kalia. What the hell kind of bastard is accompanying you? Simon was angry when he heard about the stranger who accompanied Kalia. If he couldn't find her with magic, he was going to find her himself, even if he had to search every city. And when we meet again, I will bind you so tightly that you will no longer be able to leave me. He was ready for any relationship as long as he could be with her. Of course, most of all, he wanted their feelings to be mutual. But even if that wasn't the case, he wasn't going to lose her again. Sad singing could be heard all around. This was sung by captive fairies who were locked in a cage by the treacherous prince. They prayed for salvation and asked him to set them free. Despite the suffering of the fairies, he continued to mock them. The prince forced them to sing for him. He said that if he liked their singing, then perhaps he would let them live a little longer. The fairies did not understand why he captivated them and wanted only one thing: return back home. Suddenly the prince felt something. Lost contact with tame dogs? He became worried. This meant they were dead. He wondered who could kill them and how. He knew that the children had disappeared into the fairy forest. Maybe it was done by the garrison who went in search? In any case, weak spirit stones were placed in them. Their death was only a matter of time. But the prince knew that now he would have to clean up after them so as not to leave any traces that could point to him. Ruin, let's go for a walk, he said to his servant and ordered someone to look after the fairies. And if they start to behave badly, then simply cut off their arms and legs. Go together, baby coming soon, I must protect, excited Gaia told Kalia, holding her hand tightly. The amazed girl did not understand what the fairy was talking about. The fairy king also didn't understand why Gaia was so obsessed with caring for this child. The fairy just knew that she would be needed when the child was born. She didn't care about her father's words that she would be in danger as soon as she left the forest. The king had no choice. He wanted to convince her in any way. Take it, he said, and extended his palm with the bracelet towards Kalia. The soul of the ancient spirit Amuntia is dissolved in this bracelet. If the fairy leaves her imprint on it, then you can summon her at any time. It was a birthday present for Gaia. The king realized that it was better to give it to the girl. If the moment comes when she needs help, she can call on them. I will come for it when there is no longer any need to use it. Accept it, the king insisted, giving the bracelet. Kalia didn't understand whether she should say thank you. She didn't even ask for it. But she took it anyway. Okay, I understand you, said Kalia and put the bracelet on her hand. Gaia was happy that the girl agreed to accept their help. Suddenly, the king felt some alien hostile energy. He realized that someone had the courage to invade the fairy forest in the middle of the night. It was urgent to get everyone out. Gaia, take the children away, he told his daughter and ordered her not to come out from behind the trees until he said so. Here. And they all moved on. When she was already leaving, Kalia glanced at the king and saw that he smiled at her. Or did she imagine it? After some time, they walked through the dark forest and saw the place where they passed the wall during the day. It was time to wake up the children. Gaia rushed to hug Kalia. It was time to say goodbye. "Be sure to call me," the fairy said, tenderly hugging the girl goodbye. Kalia never found out the reason for the fairy's behavior. Near the fence, Kalia carefully tried to wake up the children. They reluctantly opened their eyes and screamed in horror. The last thing they remembered was being captured by creepy monsters in the forest. Kalia calmed them down, saying that they were no longer in the forest and everything was fine. She explained to them that she herself did not know the details, but most likely the good fairy pulled them out of the forest, and now they needed to quickly go to their parents, who had not found a place for themselves for a long time. Parents who had been waiting all this time for at least some news suddenly saw their children coming out to them. They could not hold back their tears of joy. Finally, their children are safe, close to them, and they are alive and well. Now the girls could return home. It was time to return to where they were expected. Standing in front of the door, they discussed what would happen now. They wondered how many hours they would have to listen to Alan swear. "Alan, we're back!" When the door opened, they froze in amazement. Dr. Allen stood with a saucepan on his head and a ladle in his hand as armor. "What's wrong with your appearance?" Haming asked timidly. Kalia began to apologize that they returned so late, but she was interrupted by the doctor's shout. "You two! They told me to wait in front of the forest. Night has fallen and there is not even a hint of return from you." The doctor threw the pan on the floor and rushed to hug them. It was already dark and they still did not return. He was about to go in search of them. Still, he thanked the girls for returning safe and sound. A little later, they were already drinking tea and the girls were making fun of his armor. Everyone was in a great mood. Alan asked Kalia how she was feeling. She replied that everything was fine. Recently, the child has become much more active. He was already preparing to be born. The doctor never ceased to be amazed. For him, pregnancy has always been a wonderful sacrament. Haming listened to the ladies' casual conversation with the doctor and thought that it was not so bad to stay in this place. Kalia, in her opinion, looked much more peaceful than when she was in the Empire. During all this time, she had to go through so much. Is it okay if she rests now? But Haming noticed that sometimes Kalia seemed a little anxious. "I wonder why," the girl was thinking, like a person who has lost something very valuable without realizing it. The girl didn't understand. Does her mentor want to come back? She didn't know who the child's father was, but it was most likely because of him, Kalia's lover. Stop! Is he really her lover? A thought suddenly flashed through Haming's mind. She simply could not know about her love. The girl thought that her mistress had two close men. The first candidate is Duke Simon. The second candidate is Crown Prince Luamond. Brick was a caring husband. We exclude him right away. Damn! Haming suddenly thought. If one of these two is the father of the child, then it will turn the empire upside down. Haming, what's wrong with you? Asked Kalia, who noticed the strange expression on the girl's face. Nothing, I was just thinking, she quickly answered. The girl thought about another problem and asked the doctor. Maybe he knows how to look after animals. The doctor was surprised and asked her again. She clarified that not for animals but for a dragon egg. The doctor stood in shock and looked at her. After a minute he said, "Dragon egg means." He could not even imagine that he would have the chance to see him in his life. "Well, can you examine him?" asked Kalia. Dr. Allen had read briefly about them in books. He decided he needed to check it out first. After the examination, he seemed slightly agitated. "What's wrong?" Kalia asked when she noticed it. He was examining the egg for the first time and could not give an exact diagnosis, but it looked like the egg was weakening very quickly. He also felt that it was very exhausted. Haming suddenly remembered that bright light from the egg that saved her and her children from the demonic beast. Was it really using its magical powers to protect them? The girl rushed to the doctor with the words that they were obliged to help him. "Can you?" she asked hopefully. For his part, he could not do anything now. But there was one thought. You could try to pour a huge amount of magic into it. Kalia seriously thought about his words. She decided to try to pour her sword energy into him. This was also a kind of magic. Of course, as a magician, she would not have been able to do this. But Kalia decided that it would be better to do at least something and put her palm on the egg. Haming and Dr. Allen were amazed to see something immediately begin to happen. The egg immediately began to greedily absorb energy from the girl's hand. The egg absorbed the magic too quickly and Kalia removed her hand from it. "Enough for today," she said tenderly and promised to give more next time. Kalia suggested that it would be a good idea to visit the Lord's castle later. Only the magicians from this castle could provide the egg with enough magic. "Fine, I'll get ready," said the doctor, and added that since first aid has already been provided, then maybe the girls will go and finally wash themselves. "You look suspicious," said the king. In a dark forest he met a prince. "Human? Or are you a fairy?" the prince asked in response. It was strange to him that he did not see any special glow from the fairies, and there shouldn't have been a fairy protector in such a small forest. The king's daughter ran nearby and pushed the guy. "What the hell?" He did not understand what happened since he could not see her. "Forbidden energy flows within you, just like in the person behind you," said the king. Now the prince understood everything. Strength and energy that is difficult to resist. Only one creature was capable of releasing such energy. Fairy King! He attacked the prince from a distance, and the guy flew away behind his companions. Their hoods fell off, and the king saw strange creatures. He felt the demon's energy. No, these weren't demons at all. The king guessed that they had crossed a chimera with a demon and had no doubt that they all needed to be destroyed. The prince rushed into the forest, but fairies blocked his path. They knew that this was their enemy, but the king forbade him to be killed. They still wanted him dead. Anger began to boil within them. "I want to kill him! I will kill him!" said one of the fairies and rushed at the enemy. "Annoying midges!" the prince yelled and grabbed her, even though she managed to injure him. The shocked other fairies saw how the prince a moment later strangled her and threw her body to the ground. And then with magic he filled everything around with fire. A fire started in the forest, destroying everything in its path. After some time the prince was already sitting at home. He was very angry after what happened. Who knew that the fairy king would be there? He thought while sitting in a chair. "Jimon," the guy called loudly. "Did you call me?" "My beloved." A young beautiful girl immediately appeared and gently hugged him from behind. She heard him leaving while she was resting. "How did it happen that you came back with a wound?" she asked, gently stroking the prince's face with her hand. "There is now a cut on this beautiful face." The girl continued to flirt, wriggling around him. The prince said he was tired. He should have gone back and gotten some treatment from Lyric. The girl began to convince him and offered to conclude a better agreement with her. "With me, the only dark magician in the empire, you will find love among the demons, and you will be able to master much more power than you currently possess. And I'll become your toy for the rest of my life, greedy woman," the guy answered her, smiling. But she continued her persuasion further. "I promise you will like my games. It will be fun." "Well?" Suddenly she remembered what she wanted to tell the prince. The shadow that she introduced into the lord's castle conveyed interesting news to her. A living dragon egg was brought to the castle. It seems that someone picked him up in the vicinity of the fairy forest. "So how? Aren't you interested?" she asked slyly. The girl suggested, "Should I steal it?" "That's why I like you, Jimon," the satisfied guy answered her. The lord left the estate due to a fire in the fairy forest. He was due back very soon, so Dr. Allen and Haming agreed to wait for him. The girl was worried that the magicians would not be able to arrive in the near future, according to Kalia. At best, it will take a month. "Then what to do with the baby?" she asked the doctor. He offered to deliver the egg to the nearest magical branch. There they could replenish the magic the egg needed. Suddenly, the girl still remembered the doctor's words that the estimated date of birth was being postponed. The child developed at an incredible speed. It was expected that the birth would take place within a week. The girl was very worried about her mistress, but Alan tried to calm her down, although he himself was also worried. Mrs. Kalia is 10 times more mobile than others. He thought that she would have a very hard time when after giving birth, she would not be able to be active. "You don't know how amazing Miss Kalia was yesterday. Even though she was in a prenatal state, she moved so easily," Haming said with admiration. "Lady Kalia was like a wind goddess," said the assistant. "Even the semblance of wind is contraindicated for her," said the doctor. The doctor did not understand why no one ever listens to him. The girl asked him not to worry because she would do everything to help the wind goddess. After waiting for some time, the lord came out to them and joyfully asked, "Did you hear that you brought a dragon egg?" Haming and the doctor confirmed it, but added that it is now in very bad condition. The lord himself had never seen a dragon egg, so he decided to contact the magic branch. He told the magician that some citizens had brought a real dragon egg. The magician almost went crazy with excitement. He couldn't believe his ears and started asking a million questions about it. "Dragon egg? What size? How are things going with the temperature? What about the shell? Alan explained that the egg has already formed a baby, but its temperature is gradually decreasing. From these explanations, the magician realized that there was no time to hesitate and asked to wait a little while he conferred with his colleagues. The Lord and his guests heard their entire conversation. The magicians began to discuss that the journey to the Lua settlement would take at least 2 weeks, even if they used magic. Then they had a great idea. Their colleague Derek was on vacation near this area. They decided that they could ask him to take care of the egg, and they had someone else in mind to help him. Soon they got in touch again and said that they had magicians who could solve everything. And most importantly, they could arrive within 24 hours. The doctor expressed doubts that some trainee or low-level magician would be able to solve this problem. It will take a lot of magic to make everything work. But the magicians replied that there was no need to worry about this. Magicians of the highest class should come to you. In the end, they agreed. Tomorrow, within a day or 2 days, maximum magicians will be in place. That's all. The Lord breathed a sigh of relief. We only had to wait 2 days. He hoped the egg would last that long. Suddenly, the doctor turned to the Lord with a request. He explained that he and his sister found this egg in the vicinity of the fairy forest a couple of days ago. But most likely the children got inside through a hole in the fence that they left behind. Fortunately, they returned home safely. But the doctor was worried that part of the responsibility lay on his and his sister's shoulders. Haeming was very surprised by the doctor's excellent acting talent. My request will sound arrogant, but I want you to say that it was you who discovered the egg. Alan finished speaking. This request greatly surprised the Lord. It was strange. Moreover, there was a large reward for finding the egg. He couldn't get it by deception, but the doctor insisted. He understood that in order to save the egg without meeting with a detachment of magicians, all that remained was to hand the egg over to the Lord. Please, Lord, please, the doctor begged. Finally, the Lord agreed and promised to spend the reward on the needs of the village. Just as the Lord extended his hand to take the egg from Haeming, he was struck by a strong discharge. Everyone was very scared from surprise. What does it mean? What happened? A scandal almost arose. But the Lord calmed everyone down. He explained that it seemed like the egg didn't want to stay here voluntarily. What's the matter? Haeming suddenly noticed that the Lord's pupils suddenly became vertical. The Lord kindly offered to stay here and guard the egg until the magicians arrived. The doctor and Haeming could have stayed on the estate. The girl held the egg and couldn't stop thinking. It looks like it. We messed with the wrong people. A guy was relaxing on a sun lounger by the pool under the bright sun. It was the 4th day of his vacation, and there were still a full 36 days left. When colleagues contacted him, he reluctantly responded. He decided to immediately turn off the connection if there was anything not very important. Derek, I have amazing news. A living dragon egg has been found. Moreover, it is about to hatch. What? The guy jumped on the spot at what he heard and started yelling at his friends. Why didn't they tell him right away? He replied that he intended to return immediately from vacation. The magicians reported that the egg was not yet in the magic tower, and it was he who had the lucky chance to take care of it. The egg is just not far from your resting place. Sorry that we're ruining your vacation, but could you pick up and deliver the egg? Of course he could. He had already imagined that he would be the first of them to see the dragon egg. Finally, the magicians asked to take another magician to help at the local branch of magic. Derek didn't really want to. He was sure he could handle it on his own. But we had to act very quickly, and we would have to supply the egg with a lot of magic. At first, Derek began to doubt that there would be a magician of such a high level in the local branch. He was told that it was a coincidence and another magician was right there. Visit Arno and you will understand everything yourself. Hurry up, the egg is dying. The guy agreed, and after a little time he was ready to hit the road. Just think, a dragon egg that is about to hatch. Who knows? What if I manage to get a mark from the cub? The guy was already dreaming on the way to his destination. They said that once in a lifetime, a dragon puts a mark on the one he trusts most. Although usually this is his mother or partner, what if he pours his magic into the little dragon and he considers him his mother? The guy was already looking forward to his brilliant future. He may have missed out on the position of the youngest archmage, but he is guaranteed the title of the first mage with a dragon. Derek arrived at Arno's magical branch. There he was warmly greeted with the words, "Deputy Minister Derek. Welcome. Are you probably looking for a minister?" Minister? What does the minister have to do with this? All the good mood immediately disappeared somewhere. It turned out that the minister was currently living in a temporary estate. He was escorted to Simon's temporary estate. If Derek had known that Mr. Simon would be his companion, he would never have sacrificed his vacation. Well, at least you don't have to worry about magic with Mr. Simon, the guy consoled himself. Before he could open the door, it suddenly opened from the other side. What the hell? The guy fell to the ground from a blow to the head. Tell me, what are you doing here? Simon asked as he left. The surprised guy saw spirits behind him. Where did they come from? At first, the guy was scared. Simon explained that it had been 2 months since he signed a contract with them and helped the guy up. Derek was very surprised that Simon managed to master the skill of controlling spirits in such a short time. It turned out he was already aware of the dragon egg and was going after it. Today we will take the egg, and tomorrow you will return with it to the tower. The Archmage dryly spoke about their future plans, and added that he would remain here for now, since he had not finished some business. Derek immediately guessed that this had something to do with Mrs. Kalia. She should have returned as soon as possible, if only for the sake of the magic tower, which has turned into the castle of the Demon King since it disappeared. Simon had shown at least some signs of humanity before, but now there is no trace of emotion on his face. True, sometimes he looked like he was about to cry. Oh, by the way, seems like one is missing. Usually there are 4 elemental spirits, the guy said as he followed Simon. He's a little crazy. We are just heading to the area where he disappeared. He'll come back somehow. The mole spirit? Kalia looked at her feet in surprise. Judging by the fact that he came out outside the forest, he is not local. Kalia understood, looking around. She came here because she was worried about the forest fire. The girl saw that, fortunately, the fire did not spread too much. She was very worried about Gaia. The mole hid and crawled under the wall towards the forest. After some time, fairies appeared. They immediately recognized her, the person who was with their king. Hello. The girl greeted them friendly. She was very glad that they were all safe. Suddenly a mole appeared and Kalia realized that it was he who brought them. Kalia told the fairies that she heard about the fire. The fairies replied that everything was fine. The king managed to hide them deep in the forest. Is she not here by any chance? The girl asked hopefully about Gaia. The fairies replied that the king's daughter had fallen into hibernation and needed to accumulate strength. But if Kalia wants, she can call her and she will come. Do you want to see her? Wait, and she will come, explained the colorful fairies. After all, this is the place of her birth. A very ancient tree told them so. She loved this forest most when she was alive, and for the sake of the king, who was very saddened by the death of his daughter, a very ancient tree created her. Because of this, the tree exhausted all its strength and fell asleep. Well, man, it's time for us to go. We can't leave the place for a long time. Thank you for your concern. The cheerful fairies flew off into the thick of the forest, laughing. Kalia was left alone with the spirit. It was time for her too. The friends should have already returned from the Lord. Why don't you return to your master? She said to the mole. Suddenly, Kalia felt a very strong, painful push in her stomach. What's the matter? The girl was scared. Alan said there was still time before the birth. Looks like I better hurry. See you later. Kalia went home, although every step was very difficult for her. The mole tried to attract her attention in different ways, and when he failed, he followed the girl. Mrs. McKenna? Kalia met the mother and daughter whom she had recently saved. Did you go for a walk? The woman asked in a friendly manner. Hello, Mrs. Leah, greeted the little girl. This is Mrs. Leah, she suddenly said. That day, it was you who saved us, right? I don't know why you decided it was me. Trying not to give herself away, Kalia answered. But little Sige insisted. She didn't remember everything, but she was sure that this lady had carried her out of the forest. See, where are your manners? The mother tried to calm the girl down. Would you like to come visit me? Kalia asked the woman. They drank tea together, and the girl's mother said that her daughter that day saw a fairy who saved her. But after listening to her explanation, Mrs. McKenna immediately thought about Kalia. Thank you, but don't do that again. Suddenly she said to the girl. She believed that Kalia was a strong and great woman before coming to this village. But it seems to me that you are not taking care of yourself at all. You should take more care of yourself, Miss Leah. Kalia sat and didn't even know what to answer. The woman had tears in her eyes and continued to thank Kalia for giving the children a chance to return alive. I hope you have a safe birth and live happily ever after with your baby. And I hope that you will love yourself as much as you love this child. After all, you are dear to so many people." The woman stopped crying after these words. Kalia was very touched by these words. "Shasha, your mommy didn't know, but it looks like a lot of people are worried about her." Kalia mentally addressed the child. Memories surfaced in her head. Haiming and Dr. Allen, Mrs. McKenna and Simon. Having become a mother, she realized many things that she did not understand before, and she wanted to live. "Shasha, is there anything happier and more touching than your birth? Let's meet soon, my baby. Oh, by the way, I almost forgot. I have a message for you." Suddenly, the woman remembered. Her husband was a guard at the Lord's estate, and he told her that Dr. Allen and Haiming visited the estate. But some problem arose, and he said that the two of them would be sent away tomorrow. The thing was that as soon as Haiming put something down from her hands, it began to sparkle with magic. Apparently some kind of magical object. Mrs. McKenna didn't know it was a dragon egg. In general, they were offered to stay in the estate until the magicians arrived tomorrow. Kalia thanked her for the message and her guests left. She felt uneasy that her friends had been locked up for a couple of days, and not even a message had been sent from the estate. "Okay, first I'll wait." The girl decided and sat down tired on the bed. She knew that if she overworked herself by the time she got to the estate, Alan would be furious. Suddenly, she again felt a strong push. She realized that her condition left much to be desired. "Don't tell me that I have to give birth today," she thought. "No, everything will be fine. Isn't that right? I ask you to. Let me out. I have a pregnant woman with me who is about to give birth. Damn it." The doctor knocked on the locked door with all his might. He was very excited and could not find peace. "Alan, stop it." The girl calmed him down, sitting on the sofa with an egg in her arms. For several hours, the people outside the door pretended not to hear them. Most importantly, they didn't know. Was their message conveyed to Lady Kalia? The doctor was worried, since they still had not returned, that she herself would not burst in here in person. "That's right. That's what worries me the most." Haiming agreed with him. Of course, the doctor warned her so many times to be careful. He had a bad feeling. The girl tried to calm him down. "Calm down. There is still time before the birth. Not all pregnant women give birth to their children right at term." But the doctor knew well that sometimes children are not born on the appointed day. It is impossible to say exactly when this will happen. If you do not prepare in advance, both the mother and the child may be in danger. The doctor was flooded with terrible memories of the death of his wife, Nadia. "We'll be back tomorrow morning, please let us out," he continued, yelling at the closed door. The girl went to the window and began to wonder if she could jump out of here. Suddenly, she heard a strange sound and it became suspiciously quiet. When the girl turned around, she saw that Alan was lying unconscious and some shadow was leaking from under the door. She was terrified. "Oh, what is this?" She pressed her back to the window and saw that the door had opened and a lord was standing on the threshold in some strange state. He pounced on the girl and grabbed her hand. Because of the egg in her other hand, she couldn't use her strength. "Let me go!" she screamed right in the lord's face. But he didn't react at all and was as if under hypnosis. Their struggle continued for some time, and at some point Haiming was able to push the lord away from her. And she saw this strange shadow again. She felt the dark energy that came from the lord. "We need to leave urgently," she thought, and again began to scream with all her might. "Hey, shadow, just try to crawl. Mrs. Kalia will teach you a lesson later." Suddenly there was a loud bang and the shadow scattered into pieces. She closed her eyes in fear. "Mrs. Kalia." A thought flashed through her mind at that moment. She opened her eyes and saw the lord lying on the floor, the remains of the shadow and him. "The management of the estate is a complete mess," Simon said in a calm voice. Derek stood behind him. "What an abomination." Simon stood over the place where just a short time ago there had been a terrible shadow. "Mr. Simon?" Haiming sat on the floor with an egg in her hands, unable to move from surprise. But how? The girl didn't understand. Where is he here from? Simon glanced at her with his burning eyes and walked towards her. "Thank you for saving me," Haiming thanked her in a barely audible voice, hiding her gaze. "Where is Kalia?" he asked. Simon warned the girl in a calm voice not to even think about lying if she didn't want to be fried too. Derek was very surprised to see Haiming here. What did Lady Kalia's squire forget in this village? "What's that noise?" The lord's wife suddenly burst into the room. She immediately noticed her husband lying on the floor and rushed to him. Let me postpone the greeting and take care of my husband. She asked Simon for permission. Dr. Allen has already come to his senses. He immediately realized that the Lord had briefly lost consciousness. He looked at the people in the room and felt a very heavy atmosphere. He lost a lot of energy and therefore lost consciousness. The doctor turned to the Lord's wife and to calm her down, gave him medicine. At this time, Hamming felt the full weight of Simon's questioning gaze. Hamming, have you sorted out your feelings yet? It's time to answer my questions. The girl tried to pretend that she didn't understand what he was talking about. Didn't the gentleman magicians come to take the dragon's egg? In response, she received an angry look from Simon and a final warning. I'm sorry, but who are you? The doctor intervened in the conversation. Rather, who are you? Simon gave Alan a disdainful look. He realized that this was that same insanely caring man. Kalia, where is she? Suddenly the doctor heard from the magician. Simon sat the girl and the doctor opposite him and continued his interrogation. They didn't know what to do or how to get out of this difficult situation. They repeated to all questions that they knew nothing. Simon saw from their faces that they were lying and he caught them. It was stupid for them to deny it. Even if they decided to stall for time, he was ready to wait as long as necessary. He had already spent many months in hell. It was not difficult for him to endure for a few days. The doctor looked at the magician and thought that if it were his will, he would at least tell everything now. At the same time, Simon looked back at him and thought only that he was ready to destroy him. He remembered the words of the man who saw him walking down the street, carefully holding Kalia's hand. Simon at this moment would like to make him disappear without leaving a trace. But if he was connected to Kalia, Simon couldn't just kill the man. If suddenly this is her lover. But what does it matter? If only he had wished, he could have destroyed it without anyone noticing. And his entire existence may naturally disappear for Kalia. But while Simon didn't have a clear idea of what was happening, it was better to make everything clear and then take action. He understood that even if Kalia really fell in love with the doctor, she would not run away to this outback. The magician was sure that there was some reason why Kalia had to be with him. Plucking up a little courage, Hamming decided she had to ask something. As far as I know, Mrs. Kalia left you a letter in which she promised to return. But why did you still go so far to find her? The girl understood that Simon could very well be Shashi's father. Although she was afraid to check it, she still had to do it. If it weren't for Mrs. Kalia, there wouldn't be her current one. Therefore, it was correct to say that the current one lives for her sake. Mrs. Kalia is a person of action, but what she lacks is ingenuity. Therefore, since this happened, Hamming decided to clarify whether Mr. Simon could continue to love Miss Kalia, no matter what happened. Are you asking why I'm looking for her? Because I will die without Kalia. I don't know the reason for her leaving, nor the time when she will return. How could I not rush out to find her? Simon was hurt that she left without saying a word, but he couldn't hate Kalia. She is my savior, so I have to find her as soon as possible. Without Kalia, I will inevitably go crazy. Simon finished his answer in a slightly dejected mood. Now the girl understood everything. He loves Mrs. Kalia quite a lot. She even felt a certain fanaticism. Although there is some threat emanating from him, Mrs. Kalia grew up without knowing love. Perhaps just such a strong love will make up for her lack. Hamming rethought everything that was happening. I'll tell you where Mrs. Kalia is. The doctor tried to convince her. He was sure that it was not for them to decide. But the girl had already decided everything. She understood that Simon would not let them go until they told everything. In any case, the situation cannot be delayed. And for that matter, it would be better to return early and take care of Lady Kalia. After these words, the doctor realized that she was indeed right. Is the situation urgent? Simon was troubled by these words. Surely nothing could happen to Kalia. If you look at it this way, this person seems to be a doctor. So that's why you accompanied Kalia? Simon began to get angry and lose his temper again. If suddenly something happens to her, and you are now stalling for time, be prepared for the consequences. Suddenly, a mole spirit appeared from somewhere. Simon asked what he had been doing for so long that he only showed up now. The mole crawled closer to the magician and Simon's eyes widened in surprise. What? Fairy forest? You met a woman there and she smelled of the magical power I showed? Where is she now? The magician put his hand on the spirit's head and saw his memories. He saw her. It was Kalia. A strong thunderstorm was raging outside the window. Kalia couldn't find a place for herself. She had an uneasy feeling. I wish Alan would come back soon. Now she could only think about this. The girl decided that while she could still move, it was better for her to go down to the first floor and wait for him there. She struggled down the steps when she suddenly heard someone knocking on the door. Who came so late? Alan and Haming wouldn't knock before entering. Kalia took the sword and prepared to greet the uninvited guests. Suddenly, severe pain again made her scream in pain. At that moment, she thought that if there was an enemy behind the door, it would be better to deal with him with one blow. Suddenly, she felt a very familiar aroma. At that moment, the door opened and she saw him. Simon stood on the threshold with a frightened expression on his face. You? Simon looked at the girl and could not say a word. He remembered the words of Haming, who, before leaving, demanded to promise only one thing: never let Lady Kalia worry. Even if he is shocked by her appearance, do not try to put too much pressure on her. Your belly. What's wrong with your stomach? That's all the guy could say now. Like what? Don't you see it yourself? The girl mocked his stupid question. Simon looked at Kalia and couldn't even say anything out of surprise. Suddenly the girl screamed in pain again and he rushed to her aid. In a weak voice she asked him to call Dr. Allen. Why do you need this brat? He asked irritably. Shut up and call Allen, Simon, the girl hissed, grabbing Simon. Now was not the time to be jealous. Simon took the girl in his arms and entered the magical portal with her. At this time, Dr. Allen was so excited that he could not stand still and circled around the room. He didn't know what to do. Mrs. Kalia needed absolute peace now. Maybe you shouldn't have told him after all, he asked Haming. Allen, calm down and wait, she answered irritably. At that moment, a portal opened in the room and they saw Simon carrying Kalia in his arms. Mistress Kalia, have contractions started yet? The doctor asked excitedly. It seems so, the girl answered barely audibly. He bombarded her with a bunch of questions about pain and the interval between contractions, but the girl could not answer anything clearly. She was in a lot of pain. Haming ran to find a suitable room for childbirth, and Simon stood over the girl and did not understand what to do. It was the first time he had seen Kalia in such pain. No injury had ever made her show it before. What should I do? He thought. Maybe use magic to calm her down. Simon extended his hand to the girl but suddenly heard the doctor scream. Stop! What are you doing? You can't use magic. The mother's body may not be able to withstand it. The doctor asked the guy to calm down and wait. Simon held Kalia's hand and watched her suffer in pain. But he couldn't do anything. The child was about to be born. The doctor needs a delivery bag. Simon, hearing this, immediately jumped up, asked the doctor where she was and disappeared. Haming brought the landlady, who was asked to provide a suitable room. Simon has already returned with a bag. The hostess provided her bedroom and ordered to immediately call the maids from the estate who had experience in childbirth. Standing by the bed, Alan knew it would take time for the baby to be born. They just had to wait for it. Haming, call me back when the water breaks or the reading reaches 100. Simon grabbed the doctor. Where are you going? She is in so much pain. You're a doctor, do something. The guy yelled at the doctor. Alan explained that anything more than that would put both the child and Kalia in danger. From now on, Mrs. Kalia had to hold her own. And although it is not possible to share these torments with her, it is the husband's duty to be there and help her survive them. The one who was supposed to hold her hand now was not a doctor at all. After all, I'm not Mr. Shashi's father, the doctor said calmly and remembered passages from the past. You're not his dad, Alan. I, as a mother, will read myself. The doctor realized that she had mentioned Simon that evening when she said, I won't say that I don't love him, but it's difficult to call it love. A person so close that he made you confuse friendship with love. Giving birth to a child is very difficult and difficult. He turned to Simon. Please look after Mrs. Kalia until the end. Simon sat by the girl's bedside and gently held her hand. If only he could take all her pain for himself. Simon. Kalia opened her eyes slightly. What are you doing here? Simon kissed her hand and replied that he would not ask any questions. Now it is important to think only about how to relieve her pain. Suddenly, Kalia screamed in pain again. Simon wasn't himself, so he didn't notice right away, but it wasn't an ordinary bracelet. And why does Kalia have something similar? The guy wondered. The pain grew stronger and became unbearable. Kalia remembered the fairy's words at their last meeting. When the child is ready to be born, call me. Say my name. Guy! Kalia screamed with all her might. Suddenly a fairy appeared in the room. Simon became worried and immediately created a protective magical barrier. "Who are you? Where did it suddenly come from?" the guy asked, but the fairy did not answer him. "This child is my daughter Gaia." Suddenly, someone else appeared in the room. He looked at Simon and was surprised that this young man with silver hair had reached the level of knowledge. His strength surpassed human capabilities. "Open it immediately. There is no time. Hurry up." Gaia knocked on the barrier, trying to get to Kalia. The father reassured his daughter. "What brings you here?" Simon asked in disbelief. The king replied that they had arrived to help the girl bring a new life into the world. For the birth to go as expected, she needs the power of nature. The guy didn't understand anything and didn't really want to trust these creatures. "Please let her help," Gaia asked, looking into Simon's eyes. "Simon, let them in. Everything will be okay, believe me." The guy agreed only after Kalia's request. The barrier disappeared and the fairy immediately began to help Kalia. The guy didn't like what was happening, but the fairy king told him to wait a little and explained that the fairy was only sharing the natural strength necessary for the child. "Gaia, are you going to give away all your power?" The king began to worry about his daughter. Because of this, she could even disappear completely. "Do you want to make your father cry tears of blood again?" The king could not allow this. He made a cut on his hand and took a drop of his blood. With the help of magic, he divided his soul and it turned into a stone that penetrated Kalia. "What are you trying to do now?" Simon was tired of not being explained anything about what was happening. The fairy king tried to calm him down. Even under the threat of destruction of the soul, Gaia tried to create something for the child. The baby has it in his stomach but is not fully formed, and Gaia is trying to complete it. But now the fairy herself doesn't have this, so I created this instead. Baby's fairy stone in unfinished condition. But here's what's strange. This blood magic can only be used on those who have the blood of the fairy king. Kalia lay with her eyes half open and listened to the entire conversation. She barely understood. What does it mean? Do I have fairy blood in me? But how? A new attack of terrible pain did not allow her to find out anything. Now it's time to call the human doctor. The fairies quickly flew away, and a moment later the doctor stood in the doorway with Haiming. They rushed to help the lady. "Everything will be okay." The king tenderly hugged his daughter. "This is where the territory of people began. You had to trust them and wait." Everyone gathered near the room in which Kalia gave birth. There was complete silence in the room. After some time, a child's cry was heard and Simon ran into the room. Kalia lay exhausted on the bed and the maids removed the bloody linen. A doctor stood over the girl with a child in his arms and congratulated her. Of all the children he had ever held, this was the largest. It was not easy for Kalia. The doctor gave the child to the mother. The girl hugged him and gently pressed him to her. She couldn't believe it. She gave birth to this child. It wasn't a dream. Finally, she had a family. "Welcome, Shasha." A little later, when night fell, Simon sat at Kalia's bedside again and admired how she slept. He reflected that she always knew how to turn his soul inside out. Still, he was very happy to see her again. As soon as he looked at her, his heart was ready to burst. "You did well, Kalia," he said to the sleeping girl and tenderly kissed her hand. No matter what form she appears in, no matter what secret she keeps, he will always protect her. After all, she is his whole world. "Therefore, please never leave me again, Kalia," he said in a whisper. And suddenly the girl woke up. "Simon?" She didn't understand what was happening and why he was smiling tenderly at her. In another room, Haiming was looking after the baby. She told him how everyone was waiting for him to appear. Suddenly, she felt very tired and weak. Something happened to her, and she fell exhausted onto a chair and fell fast asleep. She shouldn't have seen what would happen next. The fairy king appeared above the cradle with the baby. At this time, Simon explained to Kalia that she had not yet fully recovered and needed to stay in the room. But she answered that she already felt fine. "Then why did you stagger with every step?" he asked. But Kalia was angry and answered that this was not true. He hugged her so she wouldn't fall, but she felt awkward. And she thought, "What's wrong with this brat? During the time that we didn't see each other, he became even more handsome." It was a strange sensation. She felt some kind of itching, but not rejection. "Hey, to hell with it." The girl resigned herself to his hands on her waist. So they reached the children's room. Suddenly, Kalia took the king over the baby and got wildly scared. "Haven't you returned to the fairy forest?" she screamed. The king calmly replied that there was no need to worry about the child. He explained his appearance by saying that this blood magic can only be used on those who have the blood of the fairy king. Kalia remembered that she had already heard these words from him. But she was definitely human and there was no fairy stone in her. So how could she inherit the blood of this fairy? Maybe he knows the reason? The king continued to say that a newborn fairy could only receive a blessing from the fairy king only once in his life. All the children of the fairy race received his blessing. At least everyone he knew about. The king cast a spell and began to speak over the child. I wish you arms and legs that will never get tired on the way to what you want. A mind that will not fade even in the fog of ignorance. The eyes of a sage that see to the very root. Ears that are not deceived by sweet speech and a gentle voice like the singing of birds. And the king carefully kissed the baby on the forehead. Suddenly he saw a mark on the baby's forehead. Green light? This surprised him very much. The baby woke up and began to friendlily stretch out his little hands towards him. It was the first time in his life that the king had seen such a cute child. He carefully picked him up and the child began to cry loudly. Haiming jumped up in fright and didn't understand when everyone had time to gather here. It looked like the child was hungry. The king handed the child to his mother and asked if he could visit them again. Certainly, Kalia answered with a smile. Come any time. When everyone had left, the king looked into the far dark corner and said, Come out. So you've been watching us all this time? He ordered the dark shadows to gather in front of him and forced him to absorb part of his magic. Now you are my subordinate, said the king. Return to the previous owner who sent you and convey everything you saw, except for this moment. Dr. Allen couldn't be happier. Mrs. Kalia did a great job. He explained how to feed babies properly and how important it is to make the baby burp after feeding. Children are such amazing creatures. Allen, look at him. He made a strange face. What about him? Suddenly Kalia screamed, but the doctor laughed at her and reassured her that all newborns do this when they are in a good mood. Kalia laughed too. She still has so much to learn. Suddenly Simon entered the room and asked in surprise, Why is the doctor here? Are you feeling bad again? But Kalia reassured him that Allen had just come to tell her something. Simon looked at the doctor and thought, That's right, he's a doctor. He is by Kalia's side as a doctor. But why do I feel irritated every time I see him? Suddenly he realized what was making him angry. Initially this place was supposed to be him. Taking care of Kalia and the child is entirely his role. If it were up to him, he would not leave them a single step. Oh, well, the main thing is that you don't get sick, Simon said in a sweet voice. What's wrong with this brat, or was he not angry? Kalia thought he would be beside himself over her disappearance. And the strangest thing is that he didn't say a word about her pregnancy. The doctor approached Simon with the idea of letting Kalia rest if there was nothing urgent. The doctor knew that the father's presence during pregnancy was incredibly important, but how unsuitable is he for this role that Mrs. Kalia could not tell him about the pregnancy? This shameless man made her run away without saying a word. Do I have to ask your permission to see Kalia? Simon tensed. He really didn't like the doctor's proposal. Kalia diffused the situation by telling Allen to leave the child and go about his business. Everything is fine. Although Simon looks like a monster, he won't eat me. The doctor doubted it. In his mind, he thought differently. Simon looks like a real psycho. Why doesn't Mrs. Kalia see this? Well, nothing can be done. Be that as it may, it seems that this man is the father of Mr. Shashi. The doctor left. Shasha? Simon asked Kalia. She replied that it was his birth name and she was still thinking about what to call it. Simon reminded her that when he was little, some people called him that too. But this someone seems to have completely forgotten about it. Why don't I remember this? The girl was surprised. Simon sat down next to him and began to play with the child. Kalia looked at his satisfied face and did not understand. It was strange for her. She remembered that Simon hated children. Why did you do this? The guy suddenly asked. He didn't understand why she went so far away without saying a word and gave birth to a child. The girl asked for forgiveness. She replied that she just wanted to take some time off, so she resigned. But she didn't tell him anything, because she knew that he would try to convince her. Don't lie to me, Kalia. This is my child, isn't it? Kalia didn't know what to do now. Although Simon treated the child kinder than she expected, but not the Duke Turlone family. The girl remembered the words of Simon's mother. Although you and I are different, you saved my son. We are ready to support you without sparing any effort. It would be wise for you to become Simon's friend, and don't do anything that could harm him. Now she understood that this was a warning not to go beyond friendship. Although from the point of view of feelings this did not happen, in the end this is what it turned out to be. But first of all, this is her child. Kalia, tell me honestly, this is my child, isn't it? The guy continued to insist. This is not your child, she answered, hugging the baby tighter. This child will never be able to bear the name Simon Turlone. Shasha will bear the surname Taxicate. Kalia has already decided everything for herself. That's how. The guy's eyes lit up with fire. Okay, then tell me who the hell is his father? If he could not even fulfill the role of a father, he cannot be left alive. Simon looked intently into the girl's eyes and added, Still, whatever one may say, it can only be me. Stupid Kalia. He is stubborn, although he doesn't even know how to lie. The guy understood what this meant. She doesn't want to acknowledge him as her father. She ran away, hiding her pregnancy. Kalia must not be able to trust him. She is not sure that they can be happy together, making joint plans for the future. Kalia, just say it's me, please, say it's my child. Simon kissed Kalia's hand tenderly and begged her to tell him the truth. What's wrong with you, Simon? The girl was beginning to be very irritated by his behavior. He seemed strange and didn't seem like himself. The guy, without letting go of her hand, replied that he had decided to change the strategy. He would no longer silently watch, hoping that she would notice his feelings. Instead, he will begin to court her with such persistence that she will not be able to close her eyes to his love. Kalia felt very awkward listening to these words, but the guy continued. He promised to stop making fun of her, beating around the bush waiting for her to notice. Kalia, I love you, Simon suddenly said to the stunned girl with a sleeping child in her arms. She didn't even have time to answer, and he continued talking. He promised that from now on he would stop hiding his childish jealousy. He will beg her to look at him. The guy admitted that he plans to seduce her until she believes in his love, until he admits that this is his child, until she trusts him completely. But you... Kalia tried to finally answer all these words, but Simon stopped her with a light touch and continued speaking again. All you need to do is just give in to me. And without another word, he leaned closer to her and gently kissed her lips. Sorry, without permission. Suddenly, the guy interrupted the kiss, and the next moment he heard from the girl, Why are you apologizing? Simon didn't know and laughed hysterically. But even this simplicity of the girl seemed very sweet to him. Kalia was noticeably nervous and very awkward. She wanted to end this conversation as quickly as possible. Suddenly, she said that it was time to feed the baby and immediately remembered that she had just fed him. Simon was very amused by her confusion. He looked tenderly at his child with Kalia and could not believe with happiness that this was true. Sleeping Shasha looked very much like his beautiful mother. Simon was very happy at that moment, and Kalia gave him this happiness. In the past, due to his carelessness, he thought that they could always be together, so he did not give her any guarantees. But now, he was determined to show her all of himself. He thought about her so much and often, and loved her very much. He decided to do everything possible and impossible until the girl recognizes him as her husband and lover. The shadow that was sent to the Lord's estate returned to its dark master and brought him very interesting news. He heard a rumor that a live egg of a real dragon had been brought to the estate. Therefore, he decided that he definitely needed to watch the estate. But what is General Kalia doing there? How did this woman get there? In addition, Duke Simon, the Archmage, is next to her. It was very strange. Apparently this is their child together. The prince suddenly realized. This woman reminded him more of a weapon than a person. He never expected that her fate could take such a dramatic turn. He remembered how someone had once told him a very appropriate phrase for this occasion. Love is an uncontrollable force that can tame even a demon. My love, what are you looking at so carefully? The witch suddenly asked, who always appeared very suddenly from nowhere. The prince boasted that he most likely discovered something very interesting, and shared with her the information that the shadow brought. He was very surprised when he learned that the fairy king himself was even in the estate. The prince asked himself the question, does this mean that the fairy king has anything to do with the birth of this woman? Thinking about the fairy king, the prince licked his lips predatorily. He mentally imagined how sweet the blood of the fairy king, who had been accumulating power for several hundred years, tasted. Things took a very interesting turn. You remember, right? If you betray me, you will die. The witch suddenly covered his face with her hands and said threateningly, How can I betray you? "In my eyes there is no one more attractive than you," the prince answered slyly, thinking at that time about something completely different. At this time, at the lord's estate, Simon entered a room in which there were spirits who helped him with the search for the missing Kalia. They were very happy to see him again. "Tiara, did you break the sphere as soon as you arrived in the village?" the guy asked the mole. "It was very smart, but she won't be needed anymore because Kalia has been found." The supreme mage took the sphere in his hands and the magic began. Suddenly Simon saw in her events that had happened quite recently. This was the moment the fairies died in a fire. Then the spirits became noticeably alarmed and began to attack something. The guy chose a different chain of events. She was bad, connected to dark magic. From it, Simon learned that some shadow was specially sent to spy on the estate because of the dragon egg. "Shadow?" thought Simon, surprised. If he thought carefully, he had seen one shadow when he first arrived at the lord's estate. He destroyed it at the very last moment and saved Kalia's squire. The guy realized that apparently this darkness was a kind of black magic. He was surprised that some crazy magician had freed forbidden magic and was now conducting research. Simon was upset that in all these chains of memories that the magic sphere showed, not a single name was heard. After all this, the guy immediately guessed. The fairy chimera he discovered not long ago was also the work of these crazy people. He knew that just during the heyday of black magic, research on chimeras was actively being carried out. Simon decided that once he returned to the magic tower, he should better study divine-type magic. He couldn't stay away if black magic was connected with fairies. Simon also somehow felt that Kalia had something to do with fairies. Potassium. As soon as he thought about her, his mood immediately lifted and bad thoughts went away. Although he knew this, he still felt that he had fallen head over heels in love with Kalia. It wasn't even their first kiss. But Simon didn't understand why these memories made his insides tremble so much. It was all so new. The spirits began to attract the guy's attention, watching him with interest. They wondered what he was thinking about with such a satisfied face, but they didn't need to know that. Only Kalia should know how much he is crazy about her, and how flexible he can be for her. Kalia could not sleep. Day has already come, and she did not sleep a wink during the night. Simon's face kept popping up in her thoughts, his soft lips approaching, his pink tongue whispering that he loved her. She was very angry with herself for these thoughts. "I've lost my mind." Kalia even began to suspect that perhaps in secret about her, Simon had torn Derek's scroll again. "Why is my heart beating so fast?" Suddenly she heard a child crying in the next room, which immediately stopped. Kalia looked into another room and saw the estate's nanny named Letizia feeding the baby. The nanny was very surprised that the lady was not sleeping at such an early hour. Kalia replied that for some reason she couldn't sleep and wanted to be with the child. Nanny Letizia was worried that the girl had recently given birth and she shouldn't burden herself again. But Kalia replied that everything was fine and today she wanted to look after the child herself. The girl took her child in her arms. He was such a sweet baby. The girl couldn't get enough of him. "How can you be so cute?" As soon as Kalia thought, the next moment Shasha began yelling at the entire estate. The girl checked the diaper with trembling hands. But it was dry. Maybe he's hungry? That's not it either. Kalia couldn't even imagine how to calm the child down. She was not so confused even on the battlefield. She began to walk in circles around the room with the child in her arms and ask for forgiveness that his mother was so inept. Suddenly, Shasha became silent and stopped crying. "Oh, did you cry so that your mother would hold you in her arms?" Kalia guessed and also calmed down. After some time, the nanny returned and scolded the girl for holding the child in her arms all this time. This time, Kalia did not resist and immediately gave the child to the nanny. She learned the hard way that looking after a child is not that easy. Kalia was amazed at how skillfully Letizia handled the baby. It turned out that she had accumulated such experience over 10 years. She gave birth to 20 children during this period and therefore learned everything. Gradually you will get used to it too. Time will pass and it will become much easier, she reassured Kalia. Even if it gets hard, you just need to hug your child more often and give him your love. It would be enough. Suddenly, Haiming entered the room and the nanny also scolded the girl for not being in bed and sent her to rest. Kalia went to bed and decided that although it was not easy, she would need to tell the nanny that from time to time she herself would look after the baby at night. It was her duty as a mother. Maternal duty. She still couldn't believe that she had become a mother and this cute baby was her child. No mother was her from the very beginning. Kalia was sure that little by little she would learn together with her baby. With such pleasant thoughts, the girl eventually fell soundly asleep. A little later, Haeming suddenly met Simon. He stood at Kalia's door with a strange object in his hands. She called out to him, "Don't wake up the lady, she just recently went to bed. Hurry here." The girl pushed the guy into another room where the nanny was taking care of the child. She was glad that the magician had arrived and said that Kalia had recently finished babysitting the child. This exhausted her very much, but Shasha is now in a great mood. So the nanny offered to hold the baby for Simon. The guy hesitantly held the baby and thought about if he only knew. Kalia looks after their child in this state. He would rather sit with him himself and not waste time on inventions. "Baby, I will soon receive a confession, so until then don't torture your mother," the guy said, carefully holding the baby. "He asked me to take out all my dissatisfaction on him." "Here, take it." The guy gave the girl this strange object he came with. She didn't understand what it was. "This is a mobile, they say babies like them," explained Simon, and the girl and the nanny decided to immediately install it on the crib. While they were doing this, the guy couldn't stop looking at the baby. He had such beautiful eyes and was generally very sweet. The nanny and the girl finally did everything and decided to turn it on and check how it works. Suddenly, the whole room was filled with incredibly beautiful multicolored lights. It was incredibly cool, but Simon noticed from the nanny's face that something was wrong. She explained that most likely Shasha is too small for such a mobile. The light was too bright and the child could not see well because of this. She saw that mobile phones made for such little ones were simpler and black and white. "But when he grows up, he will definitely like what you did," the nanny added at the end, trying not to offend the guy. He immediately replied that he was leaving to do another one and would return in 2 hours. Somewhere in the thick of the forest, far from prying eyes, the rulers of the forest gathered around a huge round table. They were discussing a problem that had arisen. For some reason, fairies began to disappear only from the forests of Roxas. There were rumors that one aristocrat traded in fairies, and this may be connected. Although they were supposed to remain silent, such a thing simply could not be tolerated if it was true. Maybe humanity's victory in the war made the empire proud? Or are their lands not enough for people anymore? The elder of the most ancient forest named Kesnel suddenly asked those around him. Everyone was surprised by his words, but he repeated that most likely, people did not have enough of their own land, and they were planning to seize the fairy forests. "Do you think people are going to start an interracial war?" The eldest son of the fairy king, the owner of the red forest named Ganini, asked the elder. The elder cryptically replied that it is never too early to be ready for this. The king's son insisted that the most important thing now was to find out who the true enemy was who had begun to exterminate the fairies. Passions began to heat up between them. "Elders, calm down. Isn't it time to give our king the floor?" The third daughter of the fairy king, named Hoa, decided to calm those around her a little. "Yes, the time has come to break the silence of the forest," the king suddenly said, thinking for a minute before this. Everyone was silent. No one dared to say a word. The king's eldest son was the first to break the silence. "Your Majesty, do you mean that you don't want to stop the war?" Following him, his daughter turned to her father, who could not believe that he had made such a decision. "I'm not sure," the fairy king calmly answered. He told everyone how he had recently encountered the owner of humanoid chimeras in the forest, who had ruby red hair and fiery red eyes. "Aren't such eyes a symbol of demons?" The others were worried. The king continued to say, "This is very dark witchcraft. This has no place in the fairy forests." After that, he turned to the clan elder to find out what he thought about this. The old man thought for a moment, briefly considering all of the above, and confidently answered that the will of the king is the will of the clan, and the will of the king is the will of the forest. Everyone will accept the king's decision no matter what it is. A little later, the fairy king walked through the forest after the council of elders. He was accompanied by his eldest son and daughter. "Father, can I go back to the forest and start preparing for war?" the girl asked the king. The brother got angry with his sister and told her to calm down, since the father had not yet made a final decision. The girl was indignant that it was impossible to tolerate how some bastards use fairies to create chimeras and summon demons. A quarrel began between them. The brother said that she knew nothing, and there was no evidence of what she was talking about, and she shouldn't throw around such words. "Nobody pisses me off more than you know?" The girl answered angrily to her brother. Finally they came, and the brother and sister stopped arguing and fell silent. A beautiful woman with golden hair was sleeping in a huge tree. The king quietly approached her and gently kissed her hand. "I haven't seen you for a very long time, but you are still so beautiful," the guy said in a calm, gentle voice. "If you have been asleep for more than 25 years, then I think you will wake up soon, Mom." The girl turned to the sleeping wife of the king. "Why did you all come together?" Suddenly a voice familiar to everyone sounded. This was the second son of the fairy king, the guardian of the primeval tree. He was very happy to see everyone here together. Because of their work, they could only see each other once a year. Leah. The king's children stood silently aside and watched as their father gently stroked his wife. When their daughter Kaya disappeared, Leah used all her strength to find her. At this time, what trail was Leah looking for? The king didn't know for sure. Perhaps the traces of his daughter that he found are the traces that Leah was looking for. Did the mother find any traces of Kaya? The children asked their father. He answered mysteriously that perhaps this was so. Then the eldest son asked the question that worried most of all, but no one dared to ask his father. "Kaya is alive, father?" The king did not answer and lowered his sad eyes. Then, a minute later, he replied that now it seemed to them that they would be able to find out how she died. "Follow me, you can see something too." The king broke the long silence and turned to his upset children. "Everyone who touches the younger generation will sooner or later be destroyed." The father led his children to a huge treasury. They didn't really understand why they came here and why this particular place. "Now we need to move everything from here to there." Simon went to his place to correct the mistake that his invention was not suitable for the child. Suddenly he remembered the information that the magic sphere had shown him. It said that something had arrived at the Lord's estate to follow the dragon's egg. The guy suddenly realized that there was a high probability that they would return for the egg again. It was urgent to discuss this with Derek. Simon opened the door to his room, and the first thing he saw was the unconscious guy at the entrance. The dragon egg greedily absorbed all the magic around it. Most likely Derek miscalculated his strength. Simon decided to fix everything. He noticed that despite the large amount of magic, the egg was still very weak. But there was no hurry. Simon looked at the sleeping Derek and decided that he would contact him later when the guy woke up. Now I had to go remake the mobile for the child. Kalia woke up in a great mood. She finally slept well and gained strength. She went to look out the window and thought she needed to decide what to do next now. She understood that she could not stay in this estate. Moreover, she remembered that she promised His Highness to return if Simon managed to find her. It was necessary to return. First, she left to give birth to the child without the interference of other people. But now she gave birth to Shasha, and Simon found her. She remembered his face and his words that he was changing his strategy towards her. Words about his love for her. Kalia realized that she actually liked these words. And his kiss was very good. Suddenly she became thoughtful. Maybe I like Simon too? But is it okay for her to love Simon? The girl's memory flashed back to his mother and all her words. Kalia knew that if Simon kept all his promises to pursue her no matter what, then she would have little time before she would give up. Few could resist this face. The girl no longer wanted to delve deeper into these thoughts and decided that somehow it would all resolve itself. She will first return to the capital, register the child in her family register, and then tell everything to His Majesty. Suddenly she heard enthusiastic screams from the other room. Kalia carefully opened the door and saw everyone gathered around the crib admiring Simon's invention. It was incredible. None of them had seen anything like it. And most importantly, the child really liked the new mobile. "You're awake, Kalia," the guy said joyfully when he noticed the girl at the door. He quickly approached her and took her hand. He wanted to show her his invention, and her opinion was very important to him. Kalia didn't understand what it was, but Haiming happily explained to her that this is the most incredible mobile, which also has music. That was incredible. Simon also added that he specially made it black and white for Shashi so that the child would be comfortable. "This is really great," Kalia said restrainedly. The guy did not expect such a cold reaction from her and was a little upset. Kalia didn't even have time to understand what she had done wrong. But Haiming quickly showed her with gestures that she didn't admire the guy's invention enough. "What are you doing?" Kalia asked him. The guy was surprised that she decided to correct her mistake and stroked his head gently. "Thank you for making such a cool mobile," she said tenderly to the guy. Simon immediately melted at the compliment. At that moment, he was happy. At that moment, the room was filled with birdsong, and through the portal, the Fairy King and his children entered the room.